Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Mormon Stories Podcast. I am your host, John DeLynn. I'm here with my brilliant and wise partner, Margie. Hey, Margie.
Hey, babe.
Today, we are here to share a story about what happens when you are an adult parent of adult children and you lose your LDS or Mormon faith while one of your children is serving a Mormon mission, and you raise them to be a really good missionary. That is what the topic is for today. I get these panicky emails from questioning and doubting Mormon parents, probably monthly, where it's like, what do I do? I no longer believe, but my kid is a missionary and I don't want to lose them or alienate them. And months ago, I was super thrilled to meet Julie Durrant. Hey, Julie.
Hey.
Welcome to Mormon Stories.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah. And when we were talking over Indian food, I learned that your daughter, Jill, was serving a mission when you guys lost your faith. True?
She was. That's true.
Yeah. So we're going to tell that story. And Jill, also, welcome to Mormon Stories Podcast.
Yes, I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. All right. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. Please subscribe to us on YouTube or on Facebook, wherever on the social medias, because that's super helpful. And so normally, Julie and Jill, we like to begin these types of episodes by kind of stating an intention about why we're doing this episode and maybe why we're not doing this episode. So do either of you want to share kind of your intentions for why you're coming on Mormon Stories?
Go ahead first.
Okay. Well, I would say one of my big intentions was I wanted my mom to do Mormon Stories. And so I was like, I'll be there. I'll support you in it because she's got a great story and she's a great mother. I would say something that I don't want is my missionary friends or anything like that to feel offended or anything like that. So just
So you're not, I guess maybe I'll ask if this is right. You're not here to tear down the church, to tear down faith, to denigrate Mormon belief or Mormonism. Is that right?
Exactly. Yeah. Just kind of share my story and our family's story and kind of what's been good for us and kind of how we found a lot of happiness through this.
Good. All right. Thanks, Jill. Anything you want to add, Julie?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm just grateful for this opportunity because I'm hoping that our story can help because I know a lot of other people's stories have helped me. And same as Jill, I don't want to tear down anything. A lot of people I love are still very active in the church, but I do think it's important to share our truths. And, you know, I've influenced a lot of youth in my life, and it's very important for me to let them know where I'm at now.
When you learn more, you want to let people know.
Exactly.
And I imagine both of you want to make sure that any parent-child relationship that might struggle as a result of being in a similar situation, maybe have tips and tricks so that these future parents and children, with the children being missionaries, maybe can navigate this skillfully.
Yes.
Definitely.
Yeah?
Definitely.
Yeah. Margie, anything you want to add before we jump in?
Just that I'm excited. I love the focus on mother-daughter for this interview.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's dig in. So Julie, normally we go deep into people's Mormon background because we're going to be focusing mostly on kind of the parent-missionary relationship. Let's talk about the most important parts of your upbringing that will relate and connect to the story later. So it's okay if you give us kind of an overview of your Mormon upbringing, but maybe we won't go into quite the depth that we normally would.
Okay. Sounds good. So yeah, I was born and raised in the church. My mom was very, very, very active member, and my dad, not so much. He was kind of hit and miss. And for me, like, the church was my whole life growing up. It meant everything to me, my social life, everything, you know, I completely believed in it. One thing that's very important to my story is when I had my patriarchal blessing. my stake patriarch was actually like a grandfather to me. And he was getting up there in years, and I was 14. And so I really wanted him to be the one to give me my blessing. And so it ended up being a bit of a traumatic experience for me because it made me, I've just very recently learned the whole word scrupulosity, and it definitely started that in me.
Tell our audience what you mean by scrupulosity.
When you're just really, just all in, like completely almost obsessed with just doing everything you're supposed to do and taught to do in the church, and, being very, very diligent about every aspect of it. That's how I understand it for me.
It's basically religious OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder with a religious kind of tone to it. Yeah.
Definitely. I feel like that was how I was. And so as far as my patriarchal blessing goes, I'm just going to share a couple things. I know that, they're very sacred and special to a lot of people, but for me, this is just part of my story, and it's a big deal. But I was really told a lot about Satan in my blessing, and it terrified me. I was told that, that I had a special purpose, and that Satan desires to get people like me, and he has many followers, and they never sleep. And so that started a real fear, absolute fear. And I'm just like, I've got to do everything right, And then to go along with that, I was told that if I lived my life according to the principles of the gospel, that basically I would have perfect children, and so.
Which she got.
Yeah.
That part was true.
And so, again, that just spurred me on to, like, I have got to be very diligent. If I do everything I'm supposed to do, if I don't, then I'm going to mess up their lives,
Wow.
So,
Pressure.
So it was a lot of pressure. And I was the youngest child by 9 years in my family, and I had nieces and nephews that were closer to my age. And so I felt a real responsibility to be a good example for them too. And just I was just a really good kid. I was a very good kid, and I never questioned, and I was always faithful. And some of that I like to think was just from my personality, but a lot of it was from fear,
Yeah.
So
Can I ask something just about, when you say I was a really good kid,
yeah.
what you were taught about what that means, what it means to be a really good kid?
A really good kid. Well, I'm not even sure that it was just everything. I was very obedient. I was cheerful. I didn't want to let anybody down. I didn't want to cause any, I don't know. I just felt very responsible from even such a young age,
And when you say obedient, what were the things you were obedient about?
The church, everything I was supposed to do in the church, just be
Usually means things
saying
you
my
won't
prayers.
do. Oh, okay.
Yeah, is praying, never miss church, all activities. And then just, my parents, by the time they had me, they were pretty chill and relaxed. And so they were great parents. I had a wonderful childhood. So I was obedient to them, but that wasn't hard. I just didn't want to ever let them down because I loved them so much.
Was this in Utah?
Wellington, Utah, little tiny town, southeastern Utah, by Price.
Okay.
So if you ever go to Moab, you probably drove through, or Moab or Lake Powell, you've probably driven through Wellington.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So your family was a pretty Orthodox, believing Mormon family for the most part?
My mother especially.
Yeah.
Yeah. And my two sisters. My dad and my brother, like I said, they were a little bit more lax and very less active. But I was thankful for that, and I'm even more thankful for that now because it gave me a good balance.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, and for those who don't know what patriarchal blessings are, they're kind of like Mormon fortune telling, like a 50, 60, 70-year-old man when you're a teenager will give you this blessing as if he's telling you your future under the inspiration of God. But there's lots of like warnings and promises contingent on your obedience.
Exactly.
Or warnings contingent upon your faithlessness. It can really shape your life. It's a really foundational time.
It definitely shaped mine. Yeah.
Can I ask you a question about the implications then of your patriarchal blessing? Because you kind of mention it as pivotal. So if you were kind of thinking about your life before versus you have your patriarchal blessing, did you say at 14? Like what changed for you in that moment and just kind of observing yourself? What was the play out and the impact of that?
So because I was so young, I don't necessarily think that much changed. I just think that I was just even more determined to stick to that straight path and to just, like be a super good teenager and just not do anything wrong. I was just committed to never doing anything wrong.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. So I guess it's worth asking you, is there anything else about your childhood and adolescence, high school years that are really important to your own faith journey?
Yeah, well, I mean, so when I was 18, I don't know if you guys remember this, no, it's not when I was 18. I was 20. But a young man that I had went from kindergarten through first year of college with, a friend of mine, his name was Todd Wilson. He was one of the missionaries that was shot and killed in Bolivia in 1989. And that was very traumatic to our whole town, and it was just very traumatic. And I just remember that at his funeral in Wellington, President Hinckley came to speak, and I can remember that his talk was to me an extremely powerful talk that was how I envisioned a talk from a prophet would be. And he just said that the people who had done this would pay. And it was, he spoke very with more strength, and I don't know the exact word than I had ever heard or I have heard since. And it made a huge impact on me because I felt, wow, So.
Okay. So what did you do once you hit kind of college years?
Well, so
college age, I should say.
College age.
Yeah.
So my senior year in high school, I actually took cosmetology for a half day because I could. And so it was always my plan, my mother, it was all about becoming a wife and a mother. And in the 80s, that was just drilled into us, And it worked out well for me because I really, truly always wanted that. That was something I always wanted. But I wasn't ever really encouraged to want anything else either. But so I did that because I thought, well, that's something I can do and have a family. I can do that in my home. And so after I graduated, I went to the second year of my cosmetology training, and that is the extent of my college experience. Then I met Ed and got married. So.
Okay. So, that's really important is that to this day, Mormon young women are not really encouraged to think about education or careers outside of that helping them become really good stay-at-home moms. Is that
Right.
fair to say?
I would say it's getting better for sure, but it's more in the context of you need to be self-sufficient in case something happens to your
Right.
husband type thing.
Yeah, that's a good point. Not necessarily get a career because you want one.
Right.
Right.
Or because it'll be meaningful or fulfilling or.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just kind of, it's a good backup to have.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So you followed the plan for Mormon women.
The absolute plan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you were thinking about getting married and starting a family, what was the dream? You know, whether you and Ed talked about this beforehand, whether, you explicitly decided together what your family life was going to be like, you know?
Well, so our courtship was extremely fast. We didn't do a lot of talking before we were married, it seems. But so maybe I'll tell that story really quick. So we actually met on a blind date. Ed had served a mission. My cousin James and I were very close growing up, and James came home from his mission, and he had actually served in the same mission as Ed. And I had a friend, so we were going to the college. It was called the College of Eastern Utah at the time, and now it's Eastern Utah State University, I think, down in Price. But anyway, so it was a girls' choice dance was coming up, and my friend wanted to ask my cousin James, and they wanted us to double date, but there wasn't anyone I wanted to ask. And so James was like, well, I have this really good friend from my mission. Let's see if he wants to go. And at the time, Ed was attending BYU. And so he got a hold of Ed and set us up on this blind date. And we went, and I had a great time. And I thought, oh, I really like this guy. And he walked me to the door and had the worst line anyone could ever have. He's like, okay, maybe I'll see you around. And I thought, oh, I guess he didn't enjoy himself. But anyway, needless to say, he actually did enjoy himself. And so our first day was in November. Our second date wasn't until February. By April, we were engaged. By July, we were married. And by November, we were expecting our first child.
Oh, wow.
So from the time we met until we were expecting our first child was almost exactly a year. So it was fast.
Yeah, that's something.
That's
So-
the Mormon way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We were doing everything, and Ed was in school. He's very motivated, always had, big goals as far as his career goes. And my goal was to meet a guy that I loved that had those kind of goals so I could be a stay-at-home mom, really and honestly. And so, yeah.
And if you had to describe kind of like the milestones over the remaining 60 years of your life after marrying Ed, what were the major milestones you were going to hit?
Well, I was hoping we'd be done with school, but that didn't happen till 10 years after.
But I mean kind of the Mormon plan.
The Mormon plan.
What were the milestones you were going to hit as a Mormon couple?
Right. So we were going to, continue building a family, work on our goals as far as financially and having a home, work on our relationship with each other, attend the temple regularly, have callings, go to church faithfully, do everything that we knew we were supposed to do so that we could give our family the very best life and opportunities.
What are the things you would want to do as parents in the home for your children to give them religious instruction?
So we worked on family home evenings. We were never great at that. We always had family time together, and we would say, okay, this was our family home evening this week because, with Ed's, he was working and doing school, so I could be home. And so it was kind of like I had a weekend husband, I didn't see him and neither did the kids. I felt like a single mom. So, but I was constantly sharing little primary things and primary stories, and reading and teaching them and praying. We always prayed, taught them how to pray. Never missed saying the blessing on food, and just always paid tithing, and just everything that we're taught to do, we tried to do.
Would you say that you kind of were naturally on the same page with regard to temple attendance, or how many children you wanted, or was there an ease there, a real common values kind of denominator there, or were there kind of places of differentiation in your marriage?
So there was definitely places, because for instance, like when Ed and I were married, his mom had been a school teacher and worked his whole life. And so he would have been fine had I wanted to go that route. I was the one that was like, no, I am not. When I have children, I'm going to be the one with them. And then he was very supportive of that. But, and then like, as far as temple attendance goes, Ed was much more nuanced always. He never enjoyed.
What does nuanced mean to our never Mormon and even to our Orthodox Mormon listeners?
Yeah, so it's when you believe, but there's certain things that you're not maybe 100% in with, and you kind of don't worry about thinking about it or doing it, or just kind of.
What were Ed's areas of nuance?
So definitely the temple.
He wasn't into it.
No.
Okay.
No.
Was that a red flag to you? Was that an area of concern?
Well, yeah, it bothered me for a lot of years. And one thing I should share, because this is actually really kind of funny, but I love music. And as far as like, ever since I was small, clear up till now, the most powerful thing to me to evoke emotion and everything else is music, right? For good or for evil when I was struggling. Like literally if I, attended church when it was the musical numbers that could just get me, and I would feel so
me too.
strongly. But likewise, if I heard music that I thought was evil, it would affect me to the point to where I like almost couldn't speak. It was really interesting. And like there was music that I definitely thought was evil in the 80s. And so even though I was dating Ed and I loved him and I loved everything about him and he was such a great guy, I literally almost stopped seeing him when I found out he had been to an Ozzy Osbourne concert.
So Ozzy Osbourne was not okay.
Oh no, Ozzy was not okay
what about
to me.
AC/DC?
No, that was not
okay.
No, because remember,
Black Sabbath?
No. Because in the 80s they were doing no. Well, I did love Bon Jovi though. I'm gonna just say it.
Bon Jovi's okay.
Yeah, Bon Jovi was fine. Yeah.
Because he's super cute. Because John Bon Jovi's super cute.
Yeah,
Right?
I liked his music. It didn't make me feel awful. But yeah, I mean, and in the 80s also, they had a guy, I think his name was Lynn Bryson, that was going around doing firesides about the evils of music. And so that was really imprinted in, and that was something that got really imprinted in my brain. And I know that that's why it had that kind of effect on me was, all the talk about that. So that's a funny story.
We had that at our youth conference too, like classes about that. And then even as an EFY counselor, that is something that we would. Did you have that, John?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I read Lex de Azeveto's book, Pop Music and Morality, and he would talk about backmasking and you play Queen backwards or Led Zeppelin backwards, and it would say, "Here's to my sweet Satan," or "Choose to smoke marijuana."
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's the same one I went to.
Satan can get you if you listen to the wrong rock music.
That's right.
See, and there again, my fear of Satan was just like made even more strong from things like that.
Yeah.
And so was that a point of tension between you and Ed over the years?
I would say
They still don't agree on music taste, I would say.
I've mellowed out a lot. I mean, I just think at this point, it's just a difference between what music's good and what music's bad.
Oh. And what's objectively bad that Ed
right,
likes? I want to hear.
Rush.
What?
No, I mean, I
Them's
like,
fighting words.
yeah, no, Rush, I appreciate Rush's lyrics. I do. And I appreciate their talent. But kind of the way we worked it out, it's awesome. It's worked out for us because he listens to music all the time, but wherever he's worked, he's been able to have a sound system in his lab or wherever. So he
great.
kind of listens to his music then, and then when he's home, it's more of a
Karen
consensus.
Carpenter, the Carpenters.
Well, I did like her. But I feel like I'm well-rounded.
So Ed goes to work to listen to the music he
Yeah.
really likes. I get it.
His yes. Mm-hmm.
He has his
Okay.
own music domain.
He does.
Margie and I had the Rush conversation, right, Margie?
Hey, you know what won me over was the documentary.
I know.
Exactly. Me too.
With Neil
That-
Peart.
Yeah.
Totally.
Losing his daughter and driving
yeah.
his
Well,
motorcycle down to South America.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I have newfound respect. I really do. Yeah.
So, in terms of milestones, how would you have known as you were trying to raise your kids in Mormon righteousness? What were the milestones that your kids would accomplish that would allow you to feel like you were successful Mormon parents? What did you envision would be like success, for your Mormon for children?
Just they
They would be what? They would do what?
they would grow up and make it through high school being good kids,
Meaning what?
meaning not getting in trouble morally or
Not having premarital sex or anything like it.
and being like staying away from alcohol and drugs and just making it on a mission.
Seminary
temple
graduates?
marriages,
Seminary graduates? Yeah.
I mean, Tom, he was an Eagle Scout, doing all the primary young women medallions. I was the young women's president for 12 years in 3 different wards.
Wow.
And so big deal there, and
Eagle Scout, medallion,
yes,
seminary graduates, missions,
Patriarchal blessings.
patriarchal blessings,
and then after missions.
temple marriage.
All right. Yeah. That's the check boxes, boxes
Check,
of success
check. Yep.
for Mormon parents and Mormon children.
Yes, because you want nothing more than for them to be happy, and that's how they're going to be happy.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, let's turn the microphone focus a little bit to Jill now. Okay. So Jill, now that you've heard your mom talk a little bit about, her meeting your dad and kind of what they hoped for, what was your experience growing up in your Mormon home?
Yeah, I would say I had a great childhood as well. I mean, my parents, they were very faithful, but also we were more relaxed, I would say, than other strong LDS families. Like, I mean, we were allowed to watch like movies other than Disney shows, we'd always make fun of the families that only watch Disney, things like that. So it was like, we were good and we followed the rules, but also, I think that's kind of where my dad's nuance kind of came out, and so I felt like I grew up in a pretty well-rounded home in that way. I benefited from being the last child. I'm the fourth of 4 kids. And so kind of got to see like my siblings grow up and see like what they did. And I'm like my mom a lot. And I didn't want to disappoint anybody, especially my parents. And so growing up, kind of seeing what my siblings did and seeing how it affected my parents or things like that. It was like, okay, I'm going to do this or I'm not going to do that. So I would say I had a very, very happy childhood. When I was 12, we moved out of Utah to Arizona, and that it was really hard for me. But like looking back, it was the best thing that could have happened to me because I met most of my friends weren't members after that, and so kind of got to see like, oh wow, like my friends' parents, they're not Mormon. They don't, or they drink alcohol. They do all these things, but like they still have a good relationship. Like that was always very interesting to me because kind of how I'd always been raised was you have to follow these rules in order to be happy and to have a loving home. So I'm very grateful for just my eyes being opened to other ways of living and still seeing happiness and not having their homes crumble. Because that's kind of what I was like, how are they able to financially survive without paying tithing? That kind of stuff, So it was good. I'm very grateful. My childhood was great, definitely raised to be faithful, but also had a lot of tolerance and acceptance for other faiths and other ways of living.
Would you say that you gleaned from your Mormon upbringing that the church, faithfulness to the church was the most important thing in life?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
No hesitation on that?
Yeah, no. And that, I always felt special, and I think now I look at it as maybe feeling a bit entitled, like I had good friends that, like my best friends, in high school that weren't members. And I always, loved them, still do. But I always thought, oh, how sad that they don't have the full truth, that they'll never be fully happy, but now I look at that as being kind of silly and self-righteous in a way.
But back then you kind of felt better.
Yeah.
You kind of felt better than your friends.
Yeah. Yeah, in a way.
They don't have the truth and they're not chosen, but Mormons have the truth and they're chosen.
Like how lucky am I to be born into the true church, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you grow up with the sense of what your parents wanted, expected of you and wanted for you?
Yeah.
And what was that? What did you pick up?
Definitely, I would say just, living the standards,
Meaning, tell us what that meant to you.
Like strength for youth rules. So I would say like modesty.
What did that mean?
It meant to me wearing like shirts with sleeves, shorts that would cover like garment lines if I had garments. I remember one time I was like 15 and we went to Target and my mom and I were shopping and I was like, oh no, these shorts are way too short, and she was like, no, like enjoy it, like celebrate it. And I was like, no, Mom, like I can't do this. So
you even got more strict for yourself than your mom was for you.
Yeah.
What's that about?
I don't know. I think I didn't want to ever disappoint him. And I knew the rules and wanted to follow them to a T.
By that time, her mom had started learning a few things about how the purity culture had damaged me. And I did not want that for my daughters.
We'll get there.
Yeah. So,
okay. Okay. So, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to ask, with your experience with some of the conditioning things, particularly at church, or even, I don't know to what extent they existed in your home, but the structure that your mom kind of, the formula, right, of what was expected, how did that sit with you? Like overall, was it a fit? Did you feel very comfortable there? Was that something you adopted or was it something you felt resistance to?
Yeah, I would say overall, I'm again a lot like my mom. Like I just kind of fit into the box well because of who I am naturally. Like talking to my sisters, or mainly my oldest sister, she'd be like, I always thought it was so unfair that like the boys got to do this or got to play with these cool toys or got all of these things at church. And I was like, I never wanted that. I was good just learning how to bake, and while the boys did big campouts and things like that, And so, I think it was just, I fit into the mold very well, naturally. And, it was never really, I always did feel very comfortable and at home with church. I would say up until around high school. That's when I started to kind of feel a bit of a distance there.
What happened in high school?
I think I just, most of the members, I wasn't quite like I said, by that time, we were more nuanced. We were more open to things. Like most of my friends, I mean, I had a couple really close friends that were Mormon, and we would go to like the dances together, or whenever there was like a church activity, we would kind of cling together. But overall, like, I don't know, I felt like most of the members did choir, or I don't know, just did certain things, and there was kind of like a Mormon clique, and I wasn't in it, and I didn't really enjoy it.
Was that because your family had become a little more nuanced, as you say?
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's back up and talk about that. What happened? So one question I had. So Julie, you were more just generally Orthodox than Ed. Ed was
Way more.
Ed was more nuanced and unorthodox earlier.
Yeah.
And so you've already mentioned that being sort of a bit of a difference.
Right.
Well, let's back up in your family's chronology. When did you or the family start to move more in the unorthodox or progressive or nuanced direction? Can you remember when that started? Either of you can jump in.
When my oldest daughter came out as gay.
Okay, so what year are we talking?
2013, I think.
Okay, so that's 10 years ago,
Yeah.
about?
That is 10 years ago.
So 10 years ago, your family was still pretty Orthodox overall. Let's just take us back and tell us how you first found out about that and what happened.
Well, so our oldest daughter, Alli, she was always suffering from migraines her whole life, just terrible migraines. And I took her to every doctor, primary children's neurologist, took her everywhere trying to get this figured out. And literally every Sunday she would have a major migraine. And I just could not figure it out. I'm like, what is going on? And then when she was about 18, she was actually managing a McDonald's. And she told me that there was a girl that was that kept asking her out and stuff, and she didn't know what to do. And I think that this might have been her way to try and get through my skull some things, but I literally never saw it in her. I mean, I just never saw it. And I remember her telling me that she's like, I don't know what to do. And I said, well, Alli, tell her you're not interested. Tell her that's not you. And her sweet way of, and I swear, I am just not very quick. I wasn't quick then anyway. She's like, Mom, it's really weird because the thought of that doesn't make me sick. Okay. So that was my first little inkling, and I didn't even want to go there in my mind.
Now, was that 10 years ago or even more than 10 years ago?
That was more than 10 years ago.
That's when she was just an adolescent.
Yes. Okay. She was about 18, and I couldn't even go there. I just remember just being devastated, thinking, and so it was several years after that Alli, she was living in Washington State and
moved far away from the family.
She moved. Yeah, we were in Arizona, and she had moved with a friend there. They were just going to check it out up there, and her friend's mom was a single mom, and she was living there, and so they had moved in with her, and were going to get jobs and stuff. And I actually got a call from her friend's mom, and she told me how much she loved Alli, just thought the world of her, but she's like, Julie, she is suicidal. You need to come and get her. And that was devastating. And so anyways, I got her home, and I just knew that she needed some serious counseling. and to help, and we needed help. And I told her, I still didn't know, she still wasn't officially out then. And I knew at that point, I'm like, okay. But I wanted her to feel, I don't know, I just needed her to do whatever she needed to do to get healthy. And so I said, I'm going to get you a good counselor. And she's like, Mom, I don't want an LDS one. And I'm like, oh, okay. Because for me, I was like I thought that would be the best thing because they could understand where she was coming from and the place she was coming from. But I listened to her request, and we got her help. And I told her, you just be honest. You tell them everything. You do whatever you've got to do, and I'll participate. I'll do whatever, And so it was after that she ended up coming out. And then all of a sudden, migraines every Sunday, and actually her passing out at church one week after a Sunday school lesson. All of a sudden, that kind of stuff started making sense, And I just felt like, okay. And I knew that my daughter was amazing, and I knew that was how she came here. And so everything that I'd been taught and learned through the church was not computing with me anymore. But even with that, it took me 8 years of mental gymnastics. So.
That's beautiful, Julie. Thank you for sharing. Jill, I noticed you're also having some feelings. You guys are welcome to grab that tissue box if you want.
Thank you.
But Jill, let's have you go back. And is there anything you want to share about your memories about that same story?
Yeah.
Sometimes a sibling gets a different perspective than a parent.
Yeah, growing up, I always thought Alli was so cool. I still do think she's so cool. But yeah, I never really thought anything like that. And it's funny to kind of fast forward. When I was in the MTC, they ask you to think of a time in your life when you feel like you felt the Spirit the most strongly, and to use that when you're teaching people about the Holy Ghost. And my strongest experience was when my sister came out. Sorry, I'm going to try and keep it together. So yeah, at this time it was the summer before I went into my freshman year of high school. And but Alli had moved in with us. I knew she wasn't doing too well. And I was just like on the couch, and my mom came out and she's like, Jill, like, Alli needs to tell you something. And my mom was kind of in tears. And so I walked into the bedroom, and my dad's sitting there and my sister's sitting there, and she's just bawling. So I naturally start crying too, because that's just what I do. But like right at that moment, I just knew. I was like, oh, she's gay. She's going to tell me she's gay. And so she was crying, and I was just sitting there kind of just waiting for her to get it out. Like at that point, I already knew. And it was really crazy because like as she was trying to get out what she wanted to tell me, all that was going through my mind over and over again was give her a hug and tell her you love her. Just over and over. To the point where I couldn't even really hear her. And I was just like, get it over. Like, just say it so I can do this. And so she told me. And so I did that. I just gave her a hug and told her I loved her. And I always attributed that to the Holy Ghost. And so that's what I thought it was. That's, that voice in my head. I never heard it stronger than at that moment.
That was a proud mom moment.
So beautiful. And yet I have to reflect back, Julie, on your patriarchal blessing and you're being warned about demons and evil spirits.
Perfect children.
And perfect children. And in my memories of what I was taught about homosexuality, as they called it growing up, that it was a perversion, that it was evil, that it was dark, that it was sinful, iniquity, whatever. And how were you able to show up in such a loving space with Alli, having grown up with that programming, or did you not grow up with that programming?
I did not. No.
And the way I dealt with it, because I did grow up with that programming, right? Jill didn't really, because Ed had a nephew who had come out as gay several years earlier, and we were just all loving and accepting of him. And so her world with that was a little different. For me as a mom, of course, it started wheels turning for me, because I'm like, I know this is how my child came.
What was can you describe the programming you would have received about homosexuality first?
Oh, that it's wrong, that it's evil. And then it got to the point to where it was like, well, it's just their trial here on earth, right? It's just their trial. They'll, and I thought God will take care of it. But then it all fell back on me again, because what are we promised if we do what we need to as righteous parents? Even our children who have fallen away or there's something will come back. So then I'm like even more motivated to stay on the path.
Maybe if you're righteous enough, Alli will
Well,
get
eventually,
fixed.
even if it's in the next life,
Right.
she's going to be fine as long as I do my part.
Okay. But you were still both able to show up and really show Alli the love she needed, which is beautiful.
Oh, yeah. There's never been a time when we didn't love her or wouldn't have loved her ever.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Okay, so that was 10 years ago? So that would have been, let me think. So that would have been around 2013. So that would have been 5 years after Prop 8.
Yeah.
When the Mormon Church had really, really made tons of efforts to fight same-sex marriage and to show that being gay was not okay.
Right.
So that would have, so you were saying that's when you called it nuance. That's when your family started to follow Ed's example and become more nuanced. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful that he was that way. Because I could have went even further the opposite way had I have ended up with a different
Sometimes
partner.
that happens.
Yeah.
Okay. So because your family took that turn to be more nuanced or progressive in a very Orthodox Mormon faith, then I guess going back to your story, Jill, when you're reaching your high school years, you're probably not going to feel as connected to your Orthodox believing Mormon ward members.
Yeah.
Because your family is LGBT affirming when the church and the members still in 2013. I mean, this is pre-Obergefell. This is pre the exclusion policy.
Right.
But there's still even today in 2023, being LGBT is not okay.
Right.
So back then you would have felt the division between you and your ward.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that was the beginning of it. And I always had a firm belief in the doctrine of the church. Like I always believed that. And so kind of how I reconciled it was, these cultural things I don't agree with or can change, but the doctrine's true. And around that time I started playing volleyball. And so I wasn't, going to like youth activities on Tuesday nights, didn't go to girls' camp, kind of didn't go on track, just missed all those things because I was playing volleyball. And so, I just kind of realized, you know, like this is important to me. Like the doctrine is important to me. I go to church on Sunday, and I go to seminary in the mornings before school, but it wasn't my whole life. Like I think it was a lot of the members, the very Orthodox members.
Did your family's culture, in terms of your observance of Mormon commandments, start changing after 2013? I'm thinking coffee or alcohol or R-rated movies or any of that stuff, or even church attendance.
No, we were still extremely, extremely faithful. Didn't do any of those things ever.
So the behaviors, you wouldn't have sensed the nuance through behavior change. So what did it look like? If you had to describe kind of where the nuance seeped in, you know, for you personally, clearly with kind of LGBTQ.
Yeah. And I would
issues,
say at that point, it was just that. Everything else, I was still all in. Like I was going to still keep doing everything, but I was really struggling with that because that's where I couldn't make any sense.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I'd say for me, it was more, you know, like not surrounding myself with people with the same morals, you know, things like that you're taught in church, you know, keep good friends, keep people that kind of believe the same things around you. I didn't, you know, but also with those friends that had different beliefs or lived different ways, like they all were very respectful and like knew I was Mormon, you know? So like if, you know, it was just kind of a joke that I like, Jill's Mormon, like don't bring that up around her, you know, or I never swore or things like that, but I didn't care if they did type thing.
But you didn't isolate yourself from the world, quote, around you.
Right.
That was probably how you were different than maybe many Orthodox Mormons.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So when was the next big sort of a moment in your family's faith journey after 2013? Where do we go next?
Oh, well, Tom. Yeah. Our son, Tom, he was always just a very faithful kid. And part of Ed's nuance was like, Julie, of course we wanted Tom to serve a mission, but if he chooses not to, we're going to be fine with that, you know? So that was awesome for him to be that way
so Tom decided.
So Tom was always very faithful and it was completely up to him. He served a mission and he always wanted to. And he was just a very faithful, active young man, just a good young man. And so he went on his mission and he left in 2011, I think. I'm really bad with years. But anyway, he went to Mexico City, and I can remember, I'm okay. We had just went on a cruise and stopped off in Mexico right before he left on his mission, and I was like, okay, I think I'll be okay with anywhere, but maybe not here. You know, anyway, we get home and he gets this mission call to Mexico City, and he was super excited about it. I was super excited too. I mean, I was very proud of him. And back at that time was when, you know, you got your 2 calls a year. And I even got cheated out of one of my 2 calls the first year he was gone because he was actually leaving the MTC when he could have given us the Christmas call. And so like he and the phones weren't working in the airport, and he ended up being able to borrow someone's phone and call us for a few seconds. Anyway, you know, and then he took off and I had never really, like I had a passport card, but I didn't have a passport. And I found out how important it is to have a passport, especially if you have a child that's out of the country. But anyways, he really enjoyed his mission. He learned how to speak Spanish, which has been extremely beneficial to him. He had a lot of experiences he chose not to share with his mom until he got home because, you know, they were a little frightening. Mm-hmm. But the main thing about what I wanted to share is the last week of his mission. He has literally 1 week to go. He's supposed to come home November 4th, 11th, and it's November 4th. And Ed got a call from his mission president. And he's like, Tom is in the hospital. He's unresponsive. He's on a ventilator. They don't know what's wrong with him. And boy, I'll tell you what, that news is devastating. And here I was without a passport. So I couldn't jump on a plane and get there. But he had just started like seizing in the night, and he was seizing to the point where his poor little mission companion called the APs, and he didn't know what to do. They called the president, and he's like, get him to the hospital. And they were both big wrestlers, and it was a good thing because Tom's a big guy. And they got him in a cab and to the hospital while he's seizing.
Wow.
And he was in the hospital for that whole week. Well, not that whole week, but anyway, it turned out he had contracted encephalitis. Ugh. And his brain was swelling. And so another thing that kept me strong and faithful in the gospel was kind of this experience because he went in the hospital in that condition on a Monday. And I mean, a lot of times people don't fully recover from that. They have to, it can do some serious brain damage. And he went in on Monday. By Wednesday, the doctor or the mission president let him call me. By Saturday, they checked him out. By Sunday, he spoke in his ward, and Monday, he still came home on time.
Dang. So that was faith promoting.
Yes, very much so. Very much so. Anyway, he came home. So now to fast forward, he came home from his mission, and he stayed with us because of his seizures. He couldn't drive or anything for like 9 months until he got cleared. So he needed to stick with us. But then after that, he went to Utah State and was attending school there and working and playing in bands and having a good time. And all of a sudden, one year he comes home for Thanksgiving, and this was probably 2015, I think. Probably. Yeah. Anyway, he came home for Thanksgiving, and the night before I'm going to be driving him back to the airport to head back up here from Arizona, he told his dad and I that he needed to talk to us. And at that point, he told us that he was no longer going to be active in the church. He had left the church. And I can just remember, like, I was way more devastated over that than Alli, because I knew Alli's situation. I knew they were really, but Tom, he'd been on a mission. He'd done his temple work. It was all very much more serious for me.
Sometimes LGBT kids in Mormonism get a pass. It's like, okay, you can't do the Mormon thing because you've got this affliction.
Sense. Yeah.
So if you can't be Mormon, that's fine. You get a pass, but the rest of the kids are going to stay faithful. Yeah. Maybe?
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, I was terrified and I was just terrified for his salvation, to be honest. I'm like, he's made these covenants in the temple, and now maybe Jill can share her experience with that.
Yeah, with him, it was a lot harder. Yeah, because he came home that weekend, and I noticed he wasn't wearing his garments. And I was like, that's weird, And so after he left, I asked you, I was like, what's up with Tom, And I remember just sitting on the bed with you, just bawling, because she's like, he doesn't even know if there's a God anymore. And I was just like, oh my gosh, like, what, So yeah, I think Alli had never really been into the church, even growing up, and then when that happened, it was like, yeah, of course, like makes sense. But with Tom leaving, it was like, what, much more of a shock.
It was shocking.
Did Tom tell you what happened? Did he kind of tell you the story, or did he try to limit what he told you?
I think he was being very careful. He kind of did. And
isn't it weird that a kid feels like they have to take care of their parents?
Yes. And that I have experienced very much so through this whole, Tom and Alli both have been so respectful and so full of grace and so careful and loving and patient.
Yeah.
And, but yeah, he just told me that, he wasn't enjoying Institute, but basically there was a lot going on. He had been experiencing a lot of, newfound knowledge. And, he also just said, he's like, no, I just can't support it. It has something that's hurt Alli so bad. He and Alli were always really close. And I think it, he was more aware of the 2015 stuff. And I was still in a big bubble. I heard about Prop 8, but you don't really go there. It's a little
That's
uncomfortable.
those crazy Californians.
Yeah, and if it's a little uncomfortable, no, the church can't be doing anything wrong, right? So you just don't go there. And he was much more aware of stuff like that was going on.
2015 was a watershed year for Mormonism because, that was right around the time several excommunications happened of like people questioning the church. The church had come out with the gospel topics essays a year or so prior. So the gospel topics essays start to get out there. The CES letter comes out in 2014, 2015, the excommunications, and then, same-sex marriage is legalized across the country, and then the church does the exclusion policy. So I think historians are going to write, maybe, if they're paying attention, that 2015 was kind of a watershed year where a lot of people lost their faith in the church. And Logan would have been one of a few ground zeros.
Yeah, for that. We were in Tucson, so it was, yeah. But Tom was in Logan. And it's kind of mind-boggling because, I hadn't heard all that's happening then. I didn't hear about any of it.
You're in the bubble, the Mormon bubble.
I was too busy planning the next Young Women activity,
Okay.
They keep you busy.
Yeah. Oh, I was very busy. Very, very busy.
I do think it's interesting with regard to some of these moments, particularly with Tom and, coming to tell you about his shift in belief. And you made the comment, John, about how strange it is to have, children on some level being aware of their parents' needs and taking care of them. Because I actually view it as kind of one of the core undercurrents in Mormon culture, actually. So like people pleasing can be,
yes,
that can oftentimes take root around kind of taking care of your parents. You want them to be happy with you. You want them to not be stressed. You want them to feel. And so I actually view it as actually a very, it's just kind of, for me, part of being conditioned within a system like Mormonism, that children actually do, in many ways, show up in ways to take care of their parents.
I agree. I did that with my mom, and I've definitely seen it with my kids. Yeah.
Yeah, and I just want to say now, as I'm trying to understand how to be a better parent, it's pretty much never a kid's job. If a parent has their full faculties, is emotionally healthy and is mature, it's pretty much never a kid's job to be worried about taking care of their parents' feelings or protecting their faith or their worldview. In my view now, I never want my kids to have to carry that burden. I just want my kids to be able to be 100% honest with me, tell me exactly what they're thinking and feeling. And my job is to support them, not to have them worry about taking care of me.
I love that. I totally agree with that because what happened with them not feeling like they could completely and totally be open and honest with me is, for years I felt I felt a wall, and I felt like nothing ever went, no conversations, nothing ever went very deep. I felt a distance. And as a mother, I felt it deeply, and I couldn't figure out why. I'm like, what have I done? How have I offended him? I had no idea, and I understand now it was just their way of protecting not only me, but also themselves, from what I may have, any guilt I may have played, not meaning to, but you're still wanting to send them an Ensign article or do whatever you can to bolster their faith,
Yeah, so the disconnect kind of
I
develops
felt
and grows.
that. And I would tell Ed, I just can't figure it out. I just feel like, why doesn't Alli want to talk to me much? And just why does Tom, act distant? I don't know. It was definitely a rough time.
Because from a kid's perspective, an adult kid even, best case scenario, you tell your Mormon parents you're gay or you lost your faith, they're just going to be disappointed in you for the rest of your life. Like I often have said, an adult Mormon child could get the Nobel Peace Prize or cure cancer, and they would still be a disappointment to their Orthodox Mormon parents for the rest of their lives.
If they left the church.
If they left the church. Mm-hmm. But that's the best case scenario, is to be an eternal disappointment. The worst case scenario is to be marginalized or shut off or even cut off from family dynamics and rejected by your parents as evil and as unsafe. And I think that makes kids, I guess you make a great point. They don't just tread lightly with their adult Mormon parents to be sensitive to their feelings, but sometimes they do it for self-preservation.
Yeah,
Exactly.
that's a great point.
Yeah, I remember it was like right before I left on my mission, me and my brother and his girlfriend went and visited my sister and her fiance. And I remember we were sitting around the campfire talking, and, I was like, my brother just, I think we're pretty like loving family. We're not afraid to say that or show that. But I remember my brother just saying, it's hard because I feel like mom and dad are just hoping I'll be like the prodigal son, that I'll come back, and he's like, and I'm not going to. And so I think we were always like very loving and caring, but there was kind of a hope, especially for Tom, that he would come back someday. And I think he felt that, and he knew that he wasn't going to. And so he felt bad.
Well, but if I did what I was supposed to do, he would, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So Tom, let's just say Tom was the second shoe to drop.
Yes.
That's 2015. So that's 8 years ago.
Yeah.
We've still got at least another 5 or 6 years to go of you guys hanging on and being Orthodox. So when Tom loses his faith, that's your second domino to drop. How did that affect your faith and your practice, Julie, and also Jill?
It didn't change me. I was more motivated. I was very, the one thing that never ever was in question for me was my love for my children. So there would have never been anything that would make me like want to distance myself or not have them around. I mean, I genuinely love the company of my kids, and, but again, it's just like, I would just keep going back to those core beliefs where if I just stay faithful and if I can be a good example, this happens, my brother did the same thing. He didn't come back, but maybe Tom, and, he has enough experiences with the Spirit and everything else. It'll come back to him because we're promised these things. And, but I didn't change at all. I was still serving in callings. I think by then I was in the Relief Society presidency and just,
Can I just say really quick, that dynamic totally makes sense to me though. because on some level, it's how deeply you connect with the promise that it does rest on you, and that for whatever reason, your behavior and your choices and your belief controls the destiny of all the people who depend on you, your children.
Yes.
So when you're meeting in your life these moments of like precariousness for the salvation of their souls, you're like, double down. Okay, now we really have to like get back at it.
And you pray more and you fast more and
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah, with
You go to the temple more?
Yeah.
Sorry, Jill.
I was just gonna say, yeah, with Alli, it was more like that was the one that kind of sparked some questions and like, why is this happening? Why is what I'm being taught in church not really resonate with what I see in my own life? Whereas with Tom, it was like, okay, I've been trained for this moment, like I know when people leave that I just need to be stronger. I need to be a good example. So yeah, with Tom, it didn't make me question much. It just made me want to stay strong.
Okay. And isn't that interesting? Because I guess if I'm being purely logical, like you would raise these kids, you would know that they were smart. You would know that they were honest. You would know that you would respect them. Mm-hmm. And so when not one, but two of your own offspring say, hey, there's something wrong here. There's like, there are problems. And they choose to stray from the path that, you raised them to follow. Logic would say that a parent would go, oh, well, if they're smart, if Alli didn't choose this, and if she's good, the church's teachings about LGBT people must be wrong. And then my son, Tom leaves and he learns all this stuff that's problematic. Well, there must be problems with the church. So let me investigate and decide if it's true. But oftentimes the way the programming works is something very different happens because of your patriarchal blessing.
You double down.
Because of your programming, right?
Yeah.
So, what happens?
You double down. You just do. Eventually, thank heavens, logic did kick in. But yeah, you're absolutely right.
That's interesting. That's kind of programming.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Right?
And isn't there direct, aren't there scriptures that say on some level, that it's about the parents, the sins of the
sins of
the
sins of the children will be on the heads of their parents.
Right.
Absolutely. That was one that ran through my brain constantly.
And there's the passage in the Book of Mormon that all the 2,000 stripling warriors were super righteous and protected because why?
Because
they were mama's mothers. Yep.
Because their mothers are faithful.
Yes.
And that sends the message that instead of you becoming curious when your kids start leaving, you just become more faithful.
More faithful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
It's
It is
we
very
can
interesting.
save them. We can save them as moms.
My mother's love and my commitment to this gospel and to the Lord is going to save them. Yep.
All right. So second shoe drops in 2015 and you guys become more faithful.
Yeah.
What happens next? What's next when does the next shoe drop?
Well, before the next shoe drops, I would say we might want to discuss my daughter Jamie's mission.
Okay.
So Jamie served a mission, and this way we'll work our way to Jill's mission. But Jamie served a mission in Dallas, Texas, and that was her choice too. She wanted to go, and I was like, "Oh, this will be good. You learn independence, and." I have to admit, I was not exactly ready for it after the trauma of Tom's mission. I'm like, okay, part of me thought it'll be good for her. The other part of me is like, oh, I really don't want to do this again, Yeah. And so she served her mission, and she loved her mission president and his wife, but her mission was really tough. She had they had a stalker and found where they lived, and they had to come and move them in the night to some other missionaries' apartments.
You maybe said this, but where is this again?
In Dallas, Texas.
Okay, right,
yeah.
okay.
And then, and she was just she was still on her mission in the time of only calling 2 times a year. And Jamie had always been very, very much kind of, like dependent on the family, just very much, I don't know, needed us, So her going off for the first time doing and being like isolated with her companion 2 hours away from anyone else was tough. But she just flung herself in full force. But then on her mission, we had more trauma where, it made national news. Where she was serving, the bishop's daughter had been going out teaching with them. She had been preparing to serve a mission, and she was on her way to a mission prep class on a Sunday night and had the family van and stopped off at Walgreens to return a movie, and she never showed up for mission prep. And anyway, terrible story short, she was kidnapped, raped, and murdered. And that was really hard it's devastating, but it was really hard on Jamie, and I don't feel like they got maybe the mental care they should have had,
Wow.
It was really, really tough. And, at the same time, we had a tragedy in our family. So there was a lot going on when Jamie was on her mission. And then her last week of her mission, I was watching the news, watching this massive tornado hit right by where she's at, and couldn't call her or anything. And she spent the last week of her mission, helping clean up and stuff from that. And so by the time she got home from her mission changed her. Her mission changed her, and not for the better. She came home a different person.
What do you mean?
Yeah.
She was always just so happy-go-lucky, bubbly, fun.
Yeah.
And it just looked like she'd seen some things, she just
And she
didn't really have a excitement for
and
life.
very much depressed.
Yeah.
And just like a little shell of herself that she had been. Her just super bubbly, fun, happy self. And so I struggled with that. That was definitely another thing that was starting to saw into the, fundamentalism of my faith, because I just was like, how come she's this damaged after serving God for 18 months?
Yeah, exactly. Like it happens when she is amidst, serving.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And it was really devastating. And it's taken years to start getting her back. Anyways, Jill, anything you want to say to that?
Yeah, I think that was something that was strange to me, because you're promised all these blessings, if you serve a faithful, righteous mission, which I knew she did. And it was just like, that's strange, because she doesn't seem happier. She doesn't seem like all the blessings that are promised. So yeah, I think that kind of got the wheels turning a little bit too.
And even if you feel like on some level she was harmed, not even just not happy, but there's part of her that's traumatized.
Yeah.
Definitely she experienced trauma. Definitely. Very, very severe trauma. Yeah.
But she just kind of kept chugging along. She got home, went to BYUI.
I did get her some therapy.
Yeah, there's therapy, but
not enough, I don't think.
And then she just made a lot of really big life decisions really fast after, because that's what you're supposed to do after a mission.
Yeah.
But she definitely wasn't in a mental place
where she should have done that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you're supposed to go to a BYU school, marry as fast as you can, and start having as many kids as you can, kind of like you did.
Yes.
Julie, right?
Exactly.
And there's that double down again, too, where on some level, I would imagine, where it's like, well, now I really want to protect myself because that awful thing happened. Now I really want to, Yeah, and
I think that Jamie also, because of her experiences, started getting some cracks And she started getting some cracks way before she told me she did, So, yeah. And then fast forward to Jill decided to serve a mission.
Okay, so she would have come home around what year?
She came home in 2016.
Okay, so that was just the next year. Yeah, so I guess I'm noticing that one of the strongest points of Mormonism is that it makes this promise. It makes this promise, the world can be a scary place. The world can be an uncertain place. So if you're a parent, if you want to be a parent, you're newlyweds, it's like, hey, if I follow this path, I'll know what to do. I'll know what rules to follow. And then I'll know how to raise my kids. Mm-hmm. And if I do all these things, we're going to have happy, healthy children, and we're going to be a happy, healthy, and eternal family. And that's one of the propositions of Mormonism. When missionaries knock on people's doors, it's like, hey, bad news for you right now is you're not going to have an eternal family. But if you join the Mormon church, we believe that families are forever. And if you do all the things, get baptized, go to the temple, be faithful, you can have an eternal family too. So that eternal family becomes like the selling point for Mormons and for Mormon missionary work.
Oh, for sure.
And so that's kind of how you and Ed kind of start your family and build your family. And what I've noticed over and over again is, even with my own siblings, is that's fine. You can do the things, you can have the kids and raise the family and be obedient. But then almost inevitably, especially in 2023, things are going to fall apart. Yeah. Kids are going to be gay. Kids are going to be trans. Kids are going to lose their faith, or spouses are going to lose their faith. And what happens when you did everything right and then it all just starts falling apart? And not just falling apart, but people are actually damaged by the upbringing, the Mormon upbringing that you provided them.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now that's tough. It brings, I don't know. You just have to tell yourself you did the best for what you knew,
Yeah.
I wonder if a lot of moms in particular, if that helps kind of play into some depression or anxiety, because you do feel so responsible, and in your mind you're trying to be more and more perfect all the time and do all the things all the time, but you can't really cover all the things it's like this impossible situation. But then it's so conditioned that it's your fault, that it always lands on you. And I think that's really debilitating and insidious long term.
Because it's never, there's this idea of blame reversal, that a high demand religion or sometimes a cult, if anything good happens, it's always the church that made the good thing happen. If anything bad happens, it's your fault.
Yeah.
You did it wrong.
You weren't following the steps.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's what makes the believers even double down, triple down, become more faithful, even when their Mormon dream is falling apart. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah.
It's
absolutely.
Yeah.
You're just trying so hard to just keep it together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, okay, but it sounds like Jamie stays faithful even when she comes home and becomes depressed.
She does. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
She stayed faithful. She got married in the temple. I remember that was another real tough thing for me, because at the time she got married, there was this really weird time where they really didn't encourage you wearing your wedding dress in the temple. They kind of just wanted to keep that, And so I remember Jamie not even being excited to go get a wedding dress, because she's like, Mom, all I'll be doing is wearing it for pictures, because she had chosen to not, like, we had a fun brunch and a little get together the night before, but they had chosen to basically go on a really fun honeymoon instead of putting all that money into a reception. And so for her, she wasn't even excited about getting a wedding dress. I'm like, oh my goodness, that was breaking my heart, right? And then the fact that
Or she tried one on that looked so cute, but it didn't have sleeves, you know?
yes,
So it's like, oh.
yeah, she did. And I finally ended up finding one that she looked gorgeous in, that she felt gorgeous in. But then we had to get the little camisole because it was strapless, you know,
Right.
for her pictures, and so that it was garment ready. And that, you know, just her feelings about that, and just all of a sudden, just the whole Mormon marriage thing, I was struggling with that because she was so close to both of her sisters. And Alli couldn't go because, you know, she was no longer in the church, had never been through the temple. Jill couldn't go even though she was worthy, but hadn't been through the temple. So Tom's the only one that went, even though later he's like, Mom, I probably shouldn't have went.
Yeah, he's like, I still had a temple recommended, but wasn't practicing.
Yeah, you know, so.
That's the other
But
crazy.
at least he was there.
Yeah, like so many Mormon marriages happen in temples where family members, immediate and distant and close friends, can't go for whatever reason. I couldn't attend my brother's temple wedding or my sister's temple wedding because I was either too young or on a mission. When Margie and I get married in the temple, so many of her extended family, because her parents were converts, are sitting outside.
Yeah.
Like it's such the contrast of like we're all about the families.
Exactly.
But in the most sacred moment of a family, which is like the wedding of children, so many people are excluded.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And that was really hard for me.
Yeah.
And it was for Jamie too. She really struggled with that. But still, everyone was so supportive and so cute. And, you know, Alli and her fiance, Ariel, they were there and on the temple grounds and just being so supportive. And, you know, again, the love and grace that was shown.
Yeah, I agree. That's good.
Yeah. So when people like lose their faith in Mormonism and have regrets, one of the major regrets people experience is the fact that they allowed loved ones to be excluded from weddings. When they could have just had a civil wedding and maybe did the sealing a year after, you know?
Yeah. I remember hearing that, but kind of like the fear tactic was like, oh, you don't know what's going to happen in a year. Like maybe someone dies unexpectedly and then you're not sealed forever, you know?
Yeah.
You could do it, but you know, what's more important here?
Yeah. And they didn't even allow that until just recently,
Yeah,
you know, although they did in other countries, because I can remember Tom saying that, you know, people had to have civil marriages first, or like in Mexico, they didn't recognize temple marriages.
Same with UK.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
But even now the church has made some changes. It's still kind of taboo. It's still kind of discouraged.
yes, the undercurrent is still, if you're really faithful, you're not going to
Exactly.
do that. You're not going to.
It's kind of a worldly view to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's 2 or 3 shoes dropping. Now we're getting to Jill's decision to serve a mission.
Yeah.
Okay.
After seeing Jamie come home, I was like, let's go. Just kidding. No, it was, yeah. So I'm 4.5 years younger than Jamie. And so she'd been home for quite a while. And when I decided to go on a mission, I'm actually really grateful that she again went on a mission first, because by the time I was getting ready, my parents, my whole family was more like, you know, remember to keep your individuality. Remember, you know, it's okay to do this. It's okay. And I just remember thinking, yeah, I don't want to end up like how Jamie did by the end. And so I just wanted to be very careful in losing myself in the work, but also remembering who I was and using that as a benefit to my missionary work.
May I ask if it's okay? Like, until Thomas S. Monson was prophet or president, usually young Mormon women didn't serve missions at all. It was rare.
Yeah.
So, and then of course the church was hemorrhaging missionary candidates, and they knew they had to do something. So they opened missions up and started encouraging all men and women to serve missions, instead of for women it being kind of optional or discouraged.
Yeah.
So you would have you would have decided to serve a mission after that wave happened. But even so, there'd been so much happening in your family's life and with your siblings. Someone might say, well, you know, dang, Jill, why was a mission even an option? You were already kind of more nuanced than your ward members. You felt separate from them. You loved your lesbian sister. Your brother Tommy had left, and then you had seen how difficult the mission was for Jamie. Like what made a mission even desirous
I know,
for you?
right?
I'm curious.
Well, I wanted to go to a different country and learn a different language, but I got called to Portland, Oregon, English speaking. So, but also, I don't know. I just felt very strongly about the doctrine, and I wanted to be the change in the church. I felt like there was a real need for LGBTQ affirming stuff. I felt like I could help a lot of people with my experiences and help shift the culture of the church.
Yeah.
Wow. So you're going to go out. You're this teenage young Mormon woman.
I was 20.
Okay.
Actually.
You're a 20-year-old Mormon. And you're going to change the church as a missionary.
Absolutely. Yes.
It reminds me, have you ever seen the Book of Mormon musical?
No, but I want to.
Yeah.
There's this moment where Elder Price says, I'm going to be the Mormon who changes all mankind. You know, just that optimism. You know?
Yeah. That was me. And I also, I mean, there's a big, obviously, push to get married. And I knew I didn't want to get married yet, but I didn't really know what I wanted to do. School wasn't really, I don't know. I didn't really know what I wanted to do there. So I was like, well, let's go on a mission. Just give myself some time.
Okay.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so, Julie, how are you feeling about now?
I was
Jill
like, Jill,
deciding?
are you sure?
Yeah.
So you weren't enthusiastic. How come?
No. Well, I thought that, again, I'm like, well, it'd be good for her. And I liked the fact that it would keep her from getting married for a little while. Honestly and truthfully, that was probably the biggest plus for me. Also, Jill was gone during COVID, which, the college life wasn't fun during then. It was all, online and
That's
stuff.
for sure.
And so,
And by then they changed the rules where you could call once a week.
yes, that was huge. I knew I could hear from her once a week where, we were like, if you want to come home, you just let us know,
Yeah.
I mean, Ed and I both were, we were struggling a little bit, but we were supportive of her decision.
Yeah, I didn't know you were struggling at all, actually.
Yeah.
Get that.
We were supportive of her decision. I've always wanted it to just be their decision. I didn't want that. I felt responsible enough. I didn't need any more responsibility. But
there's something there. I have to highlight this. There's something there about nuanced or unorthodox Mormon parents that know there's something not right with the church, or maybe they even don't believe some or all of the church's teachings. But there's this programming, and I part of me wishes I had Ed here to kind of talk about this as well. There's this programming that's like, well, this is the best way to raise kids. Like, even if I don't totally believe some or all of it, they're going to benefit from a mission. They'll learn a language. They'll learn independence. They'll learn discipline. And even if the church isn't true, it's still the way. And even more importantly, I have no idea how to raise them to make sure they don't become, drug taking and selling sex workers if they don't follow the Mormon path, right?
Oh.
What?
well, yeah.
Not to stigmatize drug taking or sex workers, only to say that's the mindset of a fearful Mormon parent.
You just
that there's no other way to raise a kid.
Right. You've got the whole community, right? It takes a village, and you've got people looking out for him. I know that if Ed was here, he would tell you that he loved his mission. He enjoyed it. He felt like it benefited him. And Tom would even tell you that, and I definitely see the pluses, but then I also know the minuses, from not personal experience as far as serving myself, but, my kids serving. So, it was just kind of one of those things where, and Jill did the home MTC.
Yeah, so I put in my papers before COVID. And then I got my call like in email form, right? I got my call like a week before the 2-week shutdown with COVID. And so, you know, it still said like, you'll report to the Provo MTC
Wow,
in
the
June.
timing of that.
Yeah. And I remember talking to my bishop. He like called me afterwards and was like, okay, like, so does your call say you're going to be going to the Provo MTC? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, well, maybe the Lord knows something we don't, you know, like maybe this is all just going to clear up. And I was like, you're right. Like my call says I'll be at the Provo MTC. I'll be at the Provo MTC. And I was not. So it was a 3-week MTC period. And I was the second wave. So, the first wave of 3-week people had gone through. So I was like the second wave of home MTC. So they're still figuring things out. And I remember I was the first missionary in my stake to go out with home MTC. So I asked my stake president, I was like, so like, what are the rules? You know, how do I, you know, and he's like, just follow the Spirit. You know, he's like, I don't really know, you know. And so
Can I
like,
explain
okay.
to our non-Mormon listeners what home MTC is and why
Yeah.
it's
Absolutely.
So just for those who don't know anything and are wondering, what's this acronym MTC? So there's, you know, traditionally in the Mormon church, there's this place in Provo, Utah, and in select countries across the world, a missionary training center where the young beginning Mormon missionaries go to get trained. You go 2 to 3 weeks if you're going stateside in the same language that you speak, or you go 2 months if you're going to be learning a foreign language. So I went to Guatemala, so I went to the Provo MTC for 2 months, learned Spanish, and then served 22 months in the mission field. So, and the MTC is this really intense, hyper-religious opportunity to be there with thousands of missionaries, to hear from apostles weekly. Maybe the prophet will come speak, but you're also like in these classrooms, you know, 10, 15 hours a day, intensely learning languages or learning the gospel. And it's like this really intense EFY, but like on steroids
yeah.
of hyper religiosity with really strict rules. You know, you can't ever leave the side of your companion. You have to always be doing church stuff, you know, when you're not asleep. And the only time you can be out of the sight of your companion is when you're in the shower or the bathroom. Other than that, you're always in a companionship, right?
Yeah.
And so that would be weird. The COVID MTC, home MTC, was a really weird thing, because instead of that experience I just described, what was it for you?
Yeah. So I mean, I didn't have a companion. So my mom was my companion. And actually my best friend flew to like visit me before I left, but she couldn't really get there before my MTC started. And so she came and visited me, which is like, you never see your friends or family on your mission or at the MTC, like, but she came, and so she was my companion, you know? So we'd have class for
You
like,
had an online companion though.
yeah, that's true. So you have like an online group that you meet with every day.
Your district, right?
Yeah, your district. And so, yeah, I would meet with them. It was like 3-hour blocks, I think. And then you'd have like a lunch break and then 3 hours and then break and then 3 hours. And then before you met together as a group, you were supposed to FaceTime your companion and do scripture study, you know. It was just kind of, no one really knew what they were doing. We were all just kind of piecing it together. So, yeah. And then after that, you know, they were like, you could, I mean, because watching TV is a big no-no on the mission, or listening to music, but they were like, you know, like you can watch like church movies or things like that. So I was like, okay, like, sounds good.
We may or may not have completely followed that.
I mean, I'm not the only one, but yeah, it was so good. Like, so that's another thing. My brother and his girlfriend were living with us at the time. And so he'd already left the church, and she had left the church as well. And so I was like, oh my gosh, like this will be so good. Like such a spiritual experience, and they get to be there for it. You know, it's really going to remind Tom of his mission and remind him of all the blessings, you know? So I was like, this is so good. But yeah, and it was a good experience. Like, honestly, I would, like visit, I would do my classwork, and then I'd come out, we'd be done around like 7 or 8 at night, you know, and we would play cards or jam together as a family. You know, I was like, this is fine. It's family
We'd have
time.
band practice.
Yeah.
You
Like,
listen to Rush?
yeah, we played some.
I'm kidding.
Yeah, no, we did. Well, we played it. So, I mean, and again, I think that's kind of where my nuance came in. Like, I didn't want to be a miserable missionary, like how I'd seen my sister be for a lot of it. And so I was like, okay, I want to keep my individuality. I want to keep these things because I knew it would make me a better missionary, make me more relatable than like, and so, yeah, that was my home MTC experience was awesome. It was really good.
And it was wonderful for us too. The one thing that I will say that, you know, was like another little crack in my, or I don't know if you call it a crack, I don't know, but it was just interesting to my very true blue Mormon mom self, because it was COVID and Tom and Gabby were living with us and they were not married. I expected it to not, I don't know what I expected, but I didn't expect it to feel so good and wonderful and be so comfortable. I don't know if I expected because maybe they weren't living the, you know, so-called way that, you know, the spirit would be offended. Yeah, exactly. That's a good way to put it, Jill. But it wasn't. It was the exact opposite. It was just a wonderful relationship building time. And so I'm like, you know, it just gets me thinking even more stuff.
Yeah.
A little bit more cracking going on in the shelf there.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. All right. So that's interesting to hear because I would have thought I was so jazzed about the MTC that I would have thought that anyone who did home MTC would feel like they got a disappointing kind of like a inferior experience.
Yeah.
But you're saying in your case, you loved it.
No, it worked out well for me. And I mean, I feel like it was always really polarizing, the MTC. People either loved it or hated it. And
yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's too bad, you know, but I don't know. I was also fine with it. Like it all worked out well. And like, yeah, like my mom said, it was a good bonding experience. Like my brother, when I was trying to learn the first vision in English, he was like, I wonder if I still have it in Spanish. And so we'd like test him and he still had it memorized, you know? And so I don't know. I think it was a lot less intense way to start my mission, you know, rather than being thrown in, not talking to your family, 100% missionary work all the time. It was kind of more of like a gradual thing. And so I think that was a lot less traumatic than I think it could have been, and it is for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And the temple, another thing, the temples were all closed. And so I wasn't, I didn't go through the temple and do my endowment until I'd been on my mission for about 4 months.
Yeah, that blows me away that you would be 4 months into your mission.
And then we got to go. Yeah.
Having not taken out your endowments. But I think, Brinley, is that who it was? She also told us about that.
I think so.
Going to Florida.
Yeah.
And then you got to go through.
With her.
So you got to go through the temple with Jill
in Portland
4 months into her mission.
Yeah, I was missionary and saw my parents. Yeah.
And how was the mission experience? How was the temple experience for you?
I think it was as good as it could be. I mean, you know, everyone always jokes about, you know, how you're going to kill a cow or whatever, you know, and I knew that wasn't going to happen, but I was like, okay, like some pretty serious stuff happens here. But by that point I had been a missionary for 4 months. You know, I was kind of living the day to day differently than I would have been had I had gone through before my mission. And so, yeah, going through the temple, I just remember, my parents flew in, I met him at the temple. We went through and I was like, okay, yeah, this is like not actually, it honestly wasn't as like weird as I was expecting. And I was like, oh, okay, like this is fine. And then like afterwards we got to go to lunch with my parents and they came back, saw my apartment and we talked. So
that was amazing.
Yeah. Again, I think my experience going through the temple was very less traumatic or weird because I think I was already living kind of a weirder lifestyle. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, it was fine.
Ed and I had talked about that, and he's like, they really should have just done that with all missionaries because you're kind of in the zone where that's not going to be such, I mean, you know, like you're going to accept that experience better
Yeah.
than when you're not, you know.
Yep.
You're in the indoctrination zone, so you're a little bit more ready for the
Yeah.
temple experience.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So you have a good MTC experience and you get to go through the temple with your parents. This is
Yeah.
sounding great.
It was good. I got to call my parents and my family once a week. Yeah, I had an awesome mission president and wife. Still love them. And they were very smart with COVID. I know a lot of missionaries were very depressed and couldn't leave their apartments or things like that. But right when I got to Oregon was when part of it was lifted, where you could meet in groups of 10 to 15. And so I got there. My first transfer was their first transfer, my mission president and his wife's first transfer as well. So they got there and they were like, okay, you can meet as a group. Like, I want you guys to be doing like early morning workouts together as a group, you know? So I'd go with my whole zone and we'd play kickball every morning or like ultimate frisbee, you know? So it's just like great way to start the day. I didn't feel isolated because it was a small mission. So we were always by other missionaries. Yeah. So we taught over Zoom, but they'd make sure we would go out and get like at least a few walks a day. They were like, go out there, you know? And so they took such good care of us and very grateful for that. So yeah, honestly, it was a really good experience. And I remember, I think one thing that kind of was another crack.
For you.
What?
For you?
For me. Yeah. Let's see. So I was in an area that was very rural. And so we just kind of did a lot of service, like helped bale hay, clean up horse poop, you know. It was a lot of service because also when COVID started, we stopped knocking door to door. So rather than going door to door knocking, we looked for service. So we'd go help out at the Salvation Army, things like that. And so there was this couple and they were older and all the missionaries were really close to them. They owned a nonprofit horse therapy clinic where they did physical therapy for children, but on horses and things like that. And it was awesome. And every missionary had like taught them and tried to convert them, you know. And I don't know, they were just such an awesome couple and they'd have us over and we'd go help in their garden and things like that. And I remember one time I was sitting there and they were very Christian, but they'd taken the lessons before, but didn't want to be baptized or anything like that. And the guy, he had made us lunch and we were sitting there talking and he's like, you know, do you really believe that because we haven't gone through the temple that we won't be able to get to the highest kingdom? You know, because they knew the church very well. You know, he's like, me and my wife are good Christians, you know. He's like, we've refinanced our house to do this therapy free for kids, you know, all this stuff. He's like, do you really think that because we haven't just gone through the temple and been baptized in your church that God will punish us? And I was like, no, I don't think so. But I didn't really have an answer, you know? And so that's kind of when I just started saying the phrase on my mission, it'll be well with them. That's what I would say all the time, you know, like I thought they were great people everywhere. And kind of what we'd been taught was, you know, if they haven't had the chance to hear the gospel, that's okay because they will eventually, and then they will choose the right. But with this couple, it was different because they had the chance to hear the true gospel, but they still hadn't chosen to follow it.
Oh, so they fall outside the Mormon doctrine of like spirit prison because they had the chance.
Because they had the chance.
Whoa.
And so that was like, but then I just knew that wasn't the case, you know? Went back to like the love I felt for my sister when she came out, like I was like, no, God loves you. And so I just, I think I was training at that time, and I was talking to my companion, and I was like, it'll be well with them. Whatever happens, God's got it. It's fine. Like, we don't have all the answers. But that was something that was really like, I don't know how that's going to work, And so, yeah, so kept going on my mission, kept doing the thing. And I'd say a big reason that I went on my mission was because I wanted answers, right? They always say, pray with a purpose or study with a purpose. Always have a question in mind with whatever you're doing. And then listen, and you'll receive an answer. And so I think my big question while I was on my mission was like, what's going to happen to my sister? Like, how is that going to reconcile? And so I was a good missionary. Like, I followed most of the rules most of the time. Like I said, I didn't want to become a robot, and I knew for my own sanity that, I needed to not follow every rule, because that's kind of impossible, But I tried my very best not to feel guilty about, taking a nap or things like that, because I knew, like, I just didn't want to be miserable. And I loved my mission. I loved being a missionary. And I think a lot of that was because I tried to take care of myself, kind of see that.
Well, and also, I think that where it was good for Jill to see Jamie's mission is Jamie was the opposite, in that she had drilled in her on her mission exact obedience. And she felt the pressure of exact obedience to accomplish things. And so she had kind of seen what that did to her sister. And so she was like, okay.
Yeah. I remember one time I was calling my sister on a P day, my other sister, Alli, the oldest one. And I was like, oh man, Alli, I feel so guilty. Like it's P day, right? So, but I was like,
P-Day meaning preparation
day. So
where you're allowed to like wash your clothes.
Yeah.
Go grocery shopping,
have a few hours, call your family.
Write in your journal.
Yeah. Yeah. Just kind of have some time to yourself. But I was like, I slept in, this was kind of towards the beginning. I was
You're not supposed to sleep in on P-Day, right?
No, not even P-Day, which I did a lot. But this is towards the beginning, and I was like, oh my goodness, like, Alli, I feel really guilty. And Alli's like, hold up. She's like, you're spending your own money to serve the church right now. You're spending your own time. And she's like, Jill, you haven't killed anyone. She's like, you're doing great. Don't feel guilty. And I feel like that was really helpful for me to hear. It was like, okay, yeah, like, I didn't follow every single rule exactly, but like, I was doing good, I was a good missionary. And so I think that was very helpful, having most of my family either out of the church or nuanced as I was a missionary.
It's kind of cool that Alli was out, but she was doing her best to support you on your mission.
Oh yeah.
Always. And yeah, Alli and Tom both, like him reciting her whatever in his Spanish,
Yeah, the first vision helped me.
Alli and Ariel visited you.
Yeah, so they live up in Seattle. I'm in Portland. So the moment I got my call, Alli's like, I'm coming to see you. She's like, I don't care about the rules. And I was like, I know you don't. So I knew she was going to come, and I was like, do it. But yeah, very supportive. Like, one of the first months of my mission, there was really bad fires, and she like bought an air purifier and sent it to me, just very concerned, very good. But yeah, I was like about 10 months in, maybe a little bit more. Her and Ariel
Ariel was a partner, a girlfriend?
Yeah.
Ariel's her fiance.
Fiance, yeah.
And I met Ariel when Alli wasn't out yet, and I just thought they were good friends.
Ariel's been part of the family for 8 years.
Yeah, she's part of the family. Yeah. And so they were going on a road trip down to Portland. And so they're like, okay, like, can we see you? And I was like, yeah, like, let me give my mission president a call. So I like called him, and he was like, yeah, just like make sure it's over a dinner or a lunch hour, keep it to about an hour and a half, he said, but have at it. Like, they were so good. I knew a lot of people that came to visit missionaries, and they were very good about, like, just make sure it's during one of your dinner or lunch hours and keep it under 2 hours, and I was like, okay, and so we met up with them and we had lunch, and it was so good. So it was just, I don't know, it was so good to be reminded of who I was outside of being a missionary, because you're told to lose yourself in the work. But it was just, so good to see them. And I think it was good for Alli too, because she was like, oh, you're not weird. Like, like I was like, like I'm normal. This is good, And so, I saw her. I had another friend coming up and she wasn't a member. And so I called my mission president, got to go to lunch with her, saw my cousin. And so I would say my mission was a lot less isolating than my siblings.
It was
in the
completely
past.
different.
Completely different.
Yeah. And also Alli was, she was so supportive, but she'd also be like every week, Jill, do you need me to come get you?
Yeah.
Do you need me to come
Yeah,
get
she'd
you?
always be like, I'll drive down, I'd be like, no, I'm okay.
Yeah. I love both those things.
Yeah.
The support and, hey,
Yeah.
anytime you want to bow out,
Exactly.
I got you.
Yep.
Yeah. Took the pressure off me.
Yeah.
And we knew that she was close by, and that made Ed and I feel good.
Yeah.
I can't imagine being visited by my lesbian sibling and her partner while I'm a missionary.
I know.
It's pretty great.
That's beautiful.
It was great.
Yeah.
Yeah. And my companions at the time were awesome. Like, one of them's like one of my best friends, So it was totally normal. I don't know. I think she thought I was normal too. But, and then a little bit after that, I started to realize kind of that I still didn't really have an answer for Alli. And I had been on my mission for about a year. And I was serving in a YSA ward, and we had met this guy. He was playing basketball, and so at the park, and so we started teaching him the lessons. And he had a gay sister, and he'd kind of told us that he was a religious studies major, and he was kind of just doing this because he thought it was interesting. And we were like, perfect, whatever it takes for us to teach you. And I think it was our third or fourth lesson. He talked about how he had a gay sister and how he could never imagine telling her to live a certain way because of that. He was like, I could never imagine telling my sister, well, she needs to be celibate the rest of her life or marry someone she doesn't love, And I was like, okay, here's my time to shine, this is my moment, my whole life. I've been prepping for this, And so I shared with him kind of the story of how Alli came out, and just was like, we don't know all the answers, but I know for sure that God loves her no matter what. And that's kind of the best that I could say, And he's like, yeah, but how do you reconcile being a part of a church that expects her to live a certain way when you know that she was born like that and you know that God loves her? And I was like, I don't know. I was just like, oh my gosh, I don't know. I've been out for over a year. This has been my one question and I still can't answer it. And I remember calling my mom and dad the next P day being like, how do you reconcile it? And they were like, I don't know. There wasn't an answer, and it was like, wow.
I remember, and I don't know if you remember this, Jill, but I remember telling you, because at that point I was well on my journey. And I just remember telling her, well, Jill, the way it is now, the church just isn't for everybody. It just isn't. It just doesn't work for everybody.
Yeah, I do.
And that was pretty much my only answer for her. So,
yeah.
Maybe it's time to go back now and talk about, Julie, kind of your unraveling while Jill's having this amazing experience.
yeah. So, kind of my faith crisis, I've talked about little cracks I've had going on. And in it was May of 2021, Tom needed surgery, and he was having a sinus surgery here in Salt Lake. And Gabby she works campaigns, and so she was back east.
Gabby's Tom's girlfriend.
Yeah, his girlfriend. She's a campaign manager. And,
Hi, Gabby.
yes.
I know
Hi,
Gabby.
Yeah. And so she was working. So I flew here to Salt Lake to take care of Tom when he had his surgery, because it was sinus surgery. It was a pretty severe one. And so, I had found latter gay stories. I just kind of had, Googled, gay Mormons. I don't know. I was just looking for mothers, parents, just trying to find some sort of help. And I found latter gay stories, and I found, I think it was episode 139, and it was one where they were interviewing 4 mothers of gay children, and 2 of them were still in the church and 2 of them had left. And it was life-changing for me to find that podcast, and just because I just resonated so much with those mothers, everything. And it was like they were speaking my heart and my feelings. And so
And shout out to my friend Kyle Ashworth, who runs Latter Gay Stories.
Absolutely.
He's a dear friend, and his podcast is essential listening, especially if you care about LGBTQ Mormon issues.
Absolutely. Yeah. It was very helpful. And so I had listened to this, and then I was taking care of Tom, and I just, we had a lot of time together through the healing process where I was getting him well enough I could get him to Tucson and take care of him there. But so we had a lot of time together, and we had a lot of conversations, much more so than we had in years, And I just, this is where the logic that we talked about earlier started coming in for me, because I love him so much, and I trust his opinion and his knowledge, and he's very knowledgeable, and he's kind of one of those kids that when he learns something, he doesn't forget it. He's like like history, any kind of trivia. He's just one of those kind of kids. And I just knew the depths of his personality, and I had known the depths of his faith. And I knew where he was now. And my mom brain was just like, okay, because the same went for Alli. All of a sudden, I'm just like, I know her soul. I know her intelligence. I know everything about her. And so the logic started chiming in for me. And I'm like, okay, I have got to get this figured out, because it had been years, obviously. We've talked about how there's 6 years, 8 years, 10 years of me just doing the mental gymnastics like I don't think anybody else has ever done it any better. And, I just thought, I have to figure this out. I either have to figure out how it all works and how I'm going to get them both back in, or I've got to figure out if maybe they're right and maybe I just am missing something. And so that Latter Gay Stories was very helpful. And from there, it led me to find Mormon Stories podcast and the CES letter. And I read the CES letter all in a day. Like I just consumed it. And the whole time, like, we were going through a really, really tough build on our house. It was incredibly stressful. And Ed and I both had a lot that we were worrying about with that. And at this time, I'm going through this faith crisis. And I knew Ed had a lot on his plate. So he would get a little overwhelmed. Even though he was much more nuanced than me, I didn't feel like he was ready for the diving into it like I was. And so I told him, I said, I'll tell you what, hon, I won't bother you with this. I can't help it. I'm in it too deep. I was like binging Mormon stories, reading C.S. Letter, Fawn Brody.
Really quick, can I slow you down on that?
Yes.
This is a really important part.
Yes.
Can you tell us some of the main things you learned in the CES letter that were disturbing to you?
Yes.
And any of the things you learned on Mormon stories, just so the people who don't have any idea what you're talking about can understand what you learned as a
true believing
50 plus
member. Yeah. 52-year-old. Yeah.
What you were learning for the first time after 50 years in the church.
Yes.
Take us through the 3 to 5 top issues that you encountered.
So, the differences of the first vision, the different,
Joseph Smith's first vision.
the 4 different versions of it. No. I was like, no.
So in your words, explain what you had been taught versus what you learned.
Well, I had been taught that, he knelt in the sacred grove and, that God and Jesus appeared to him and told him there were no true churches. And I'm learning, about him, the translation of the Book of Mormon and how he was just, we all see him, the pictures of him sitting there with the plates and he's dictating, and we've seen the movies that they've made and the church has made. And there was not more than one version. And so, as soon as I learned that, no, the church was now even accepting or letting it out there that he looked at a stone in a hat, I was like, oh my word, like that was just so crazy to me.
So the Joseph Smith's story about the first vision
Yes.
changed dramatically over time
Yes.
and got more fantastical the more he told the story.
Right. And I didn't know he had been a treasure digger, and I didn't know, none of that. And I was like, are you kidding me? And that was just mind blowing to me because, his experience was very sacred to me. And so you can't have something like that be absolute gospel and then say, oh, by the way, no, that's not really how it worked.
50 years later.
50 years later, and the whole polygamy. I honestly didn't know that Joseph Smith had been a polygamist, and when I guess I thought, oh, he could have, but at the very most, I thought he was just like sealed to women so they wouldn't be alone for eternity, but that there really wasn't anything to it here.
No sex, basically.
Yes. No intimacy of any kind. And then so to find out that he was just like, marrying a 14-year-old girl or, being sealed to a 14-year-old girl, that Emma, who their relationship my whole entire life had just been put on a pedestal, Joseph and Emma's relationship and just their love for each other and their commitment to each other. So to find out that she was actually the 20th woman that was sealed to him, I was just like...
That he had been sealed to 22 women prior to admitting to
Yes.
Emma he was a polygamist. So he had been hiding and lying his first 22 polygamous marriages
Yes.
from his first wife, Emma.
Yes.
You didn't like that?
My mind was blown. My mind was getting blown, not only on a daily basis, but honestly on a minute-to-minute basis, because I was just like ingesting so much information. And then when I read, I've read the scriptures, my whole life. I haven't been a deep studier of the scriptures, but I have read them all more than once, with the exclusion of the Old Testament. Anyways, and So when I read the Doctrine and Covenants 132, which is where Joseph, is talking about polygamy, and I started reading that, and it was at that point, because I had kind of given Ed a pass. I'm like, Ed, I'm not going to bother you with this, whatever it is I'm experiencing now, because I know you can't really take it right now. But at that point, he was in working on the computer, and I just went in and I sat down by him, and I'm like, I got to read this to you, and you got to listen to it very clearly, because I realized that I had just read words. Nothing computed to me, not in that section anyway. And all of a sudden I was like, are you kidding me? And I read it to him, and he was like,
was this D&C 132?
Yes.
Okay, so it's Joseph Smith's polygamy revelation that he gets after Emma's furious, after she finds out he'd already been married to 22 women.
Yes.
Without having received revelation, he goes to his brother Hiram, creates a revelation, and then asks Hiram, not himself, to bring it back to Emma.
Yeah, go tell Emma, Hiram.
Yeah. And do you remember kind of some of the most disturbing parts about D&C 132? We've covered this on Mormon Stories. We'll include links to our discussions of D&C 132. But what do you remember some of the most disturbing parts of D&C 132
absolutely.
for you?
It was where he was telling her how God was going to punish her if she didn't accept.
He used the word destroy.
Destroy her. Yeah. And I'm
if she doesn't accept what?
If she doesn't accept the fact that he's got to have plural marriage, he needs to have more than one wife.
Yeah.
And she needs to accept that. And I was just blown away by that, because for me, the Heavenly Father, the God that I had believed in my whole life, would never talk to his daughters that way. No God I wanted to believe in would ever talk to his daughters that way. And yet I was reading these terrible, harsh, violent words that
Threats
that are going to happen to his beautiful daughter if she doesn't let his son marry more than one woman. It's just, my shelf broke and collapsed to the ground so fast.
Can I just say what's even more befuddling about that whole situation is that D&C 132 had been in the Doctrine and Covenants your whole life.
Entire life.
So you had read it.
Yeah.
But somehow it never registered.
Never registered.
It was there all along.
Because, it was always there. And so for the first time reading it with my eyes and my mind wide open and actually seeing and letting those words penetrate my brain, I was just like, this is insane. And it was, honestly, it's about the same time that all this stuff about Warren Jeffs and all these things are being put on TV, and you're reliving some of the things that I had heard and known, but it's kind of in the forefront at this point. And I'm just like, that just sounds exactly the same. There's no difference.
And so did you go to read D&C 132 to Ed?
Yeah. So I went and read it to Ed, and he's like, oh my hell, Jewel. But we were both just like, he felt the same way. He's like, I've read this, and the thing about.
So he wasn't disturbed, or he was surprised?
Oh, he was surprised. He'd never
thought about it.
No, he hadn't taken it in either. He hadn't.
Because in Mormonism, once every 4 years you would study Doctrine and Covenants.
Right.
But the lesson that would cover D&C 132 they would either skip it or only read the first part or only emphasize the verses about the new and everlasting covenant or eternal marriage. But in all of our half century within the church would have never said, let me tell you the story about Joseph having 22 wives before Emma found out, and then Emma getting furious, and then Joseph going to Hiram saying, what do we do? And then him producing the revelation, threatening Emma. Like, we would have never had that lesson ever in our half a century in the church, right?
No, never.
Yeah. So you're learning this for the first time.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was.
And I think now kind of it's more in the light with everything, but kind of how I was learned it was, okay, so this chapter's kind of split into a couple different things. These verses are talking about, the new and everlasting covenant of
beginning.
marriage. It's amazing. It's so good.
Eternal families.
Yeah.
Yay.
And then it's like, okay, this isn't really talking about marriage here. This is about the damnation, things like that. Like, we don't need to really go over that. It's kind of sidetracking, and then let's go back. Okay. And then they go back and talk about it. So it's like, okay, yeah.
And the polygamy is like, we don't do that anymore.
Yeah,
And
exactly. It's like, it's
let's ignore
fine.
it.
Like, we don't need this part. Yeah. So
Even
you're
though it's
like,
still
okay.
in the scriptures.
Right.
Right? Yeah.
And I mean, I come from pioneer heritage. I mean, like polygamy is in my family in the past, and early, my great-great-grandfather was actually the first English convert to the church. He was Brigham Young's personal secretary. And so the church, I was familiar with that, but that was just necessary to help, women who needed someone to take care of them, or there were more women than men.
On the frontier, which is not true, but
Wh-
it's what we were taught, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That is absolutely what we were taught.
Yeah.
They were doing the women a favor.
And when in reality, there were more men than women on the frontier.
Yes, and that's what I've learned lately too.
Yeah. That somehow that wasn't mentioned to us.
You don't hear that at Trek.
Yeah. Yeah. When you tell non-Mormons this, they're like, we all knew Joseph Smith was a polygamist, but somehow those of us who were multi-generational pioneer stock Mormons, it never sunk in.
No, it was not talked about, not discussed in that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're reading this to Ed.
Yeah. And at that point, he was like, whoa. And then at that point I was like, I had learned a lot about, the wealth of the church, and I was working, and he and I both had always been very, very, very loyal tithe payers. Never, like, that was just something we didn't even mess with. We wanted those tithing blessings. We would never have dared not pay our tithing. And I remember he was actually in paying bills, and I can remember telling him, because he would just pay both of our tithings when he did bills. And I was like, I would prefer you didn't pay tithing anymore. I have lost my testimony of that. I do not believe in it, And I said, but at the very least, don't pay it on my money. Do not pay tithing on my money anymore.
Because the church in the modern era uses its money and power to defeat same-sex marriage and to encourage legal discrimination against LGBT people. So once you become awakened and an LGBT advocate, you realize that you're just funding LGBTQ discrimination against your own daughter, right?
Yes, and that brings out the anger, But I mean, again, we had very strong testimonies of tithing, we had things that had happened. But now I look back now, kind of a huge tithing affirming thing for me, like that really built my testimony of tithing was, Ed and I were poor college students. We were struggling for a lot of years, and this one night he was working for a company in Cache Valley, and they had a Christmas party, and they would give out bonuses at the Christmas party, and we just didn't expect much. Well, we go out to the car afterward, and we open up our little tithing envelope, or not tithing, our little bonus envelope, and we both looked at the amount, and we about died. It was more money than we made in months, and we both just started crying because, and for us, that was a blessing for paying tithing. Never mind the fact that he was a really good worker, and they were trying to reward him for the job he had done for them. In our opinion, it was because we paid tithing. And just the skewed views you can have when you're just all in.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. So is Ed getting nervous? Are you getting nervous? And then, of course, you've got Jill to think about, right?
Jill is on a mission. At this point, I'm kind of nervous about I've been talking to Tom and Alli, little bits and pieces, and just kind of saying, hey, and
They're probably delighted.
their minds are kind of getting blown.
Yeah. Shocked.
Are you finding,
Anyway.
you had mentioned kind of earlier in the story, feeling a sense of a disconnect or a growing distance. Are you feeling as this process is happening that some of that is you're growing kind of closer together, they're communicating more?
Definitely. Definitely I was relying on them because I was finding all these things out, and I'd be like, did you guys know this? Did you know this? Did you, and at some point I'm like, why didn't you tell me? But I can totally see why they didn't, because I had to be in a headspace where I was willing to accept it. And so I get it. And then with Jamie, I was kind of treading lightly.
Yeah.
But and Ed, by this point, he's getting on board. And then the thing that just...
Can I highlight one thing just because
Yes.
like in-laws are very complicated because if you may have a couple kids who are out, and of course you've got Jill on a mission, but in the case of your believing daughter or semi-believing daughter, sometimes your child will marry into a really Orthodox believing family. And if I can imagine that there's a scenario where if Jamie had married, and I don't know, if she had married a super Orthodox guy, it could jeopardize their marriage if you speak candidly to Jamie about the doubts you're having. And so it's like landmines.
It
you
is.
don't know where to step because if you need to move because incoming artillery, but if you step in the wrong place, you could blow someone up.
Yes. And that is so interesting that you said that because yes, she did marry into a very Orthodox family, wonderful people, very, very Orthodox family. And with her, like I never told her, I would just say little things that I knew she could relate to or might think even was funny. Like for instance, I had listened to a Mormon discussions, or maybe I think it was Mormonism Live, and it was Bill Reel and RFM, and they were RFM was sharing a story about how a generator worked, how a generator was supposed to work. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this, but it was hilarious to me because it had been a talk given in church, and I forget which apostle had given it, but Renlund, yeah. And he had talked about how they were going down to this place where the church has like a movie set, and they were going to be doing a broadcast, but there was a big storm, and they were really worried that the power was going to go out, and they weren't going to be able to broadcast this. But luckily, the generator, they hooked it up.
The power went out.
The power did go out, yes. And so the whole like miracle of it all was that the generator worked, and I can remember RFM saying, so the generator worked how a generator is supposed to work. And yeah, if you spent that much money on a movie set, you hope you're going to get a generator that works, And it was just very funny to me. And so I shared that with Jamie.
What was Renlund's point? That our faith needs to be it needs to be like a generator where we produce.
No, his point was that the generator worked.
Our God
that it was
is
a miracle.
Yeah,
It was a miracle. It was a miracle that the power went out, and these guys, they went and they got the generator and they hooked it up,
and it worked.
So it's not that the church is super wealthy and can afford.
No, it wasn't even that. It was that the generator worked.
And you're saying, is that really a miracle?
Yeah,
Okay,
and they were getting kind of hard up to find miracles anyway. So I just had kind of told that story to Jamie, and she actually shared that with her husband, and they both got a good chuckle out of that because it was extremely funny. Because all of a sudden it starts make you start seeing things a little bit differently, and so I would just share bits and pieces of things like that with her. But again, you're correct, like being so careful in how you chose your wording on everything, because she's got my 2 grandbabies. I have 2 grandbabies and they're hers, and I love them more than anything, so it's like just.
And adult Mormon children will cut access of their children from their grandparents if they believe their grandparents are a threat to their family's faith.
And
that's real.
That is real. And I had heard stories of that, so I knew it was real. I didn't ever feel like that would be the case in my family, but you never know. You never know. And so I still, I still was very, very careful. And, Jamie had her own questions and stuff that she had struggled with. One of her big things she struggled with was garments, and wearing garments. And so she was having little issues, and that's why I felt safe telling her a few what I felt were minor things. And she knew I was on a journey.
Not like you're trying to bring her new things.
Right.
But kind of,
just
sharing
share
where she already had.
Yeah, just kind of putting a few things out there and not.
Yeah, but at that time she was pregnant with her second kid.
Yes.
And I remember her saying afterwards that, you'd kind of talk, but she was just like, I can't talk about this right now. Like there's a lot going on in my life.
Yes.
Like I see you, I see where you're at, but I can't talk about this. Like I can't handle a faith crisis right now.
And that's
was that you or was that Jamie?
No, that was Jamie.
Yeah. Because once you've made decisions about education, about marriage, about how soon you get married, how many kids you're going to have, what family you're marrying into, and then you've got 1.5 kids, it's not easy to go, let me reconsider my entire faith and worldview, right?
Right.
You're kind of into it at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
I will say by intention, by the church, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And she had enough of her own issues that any little ones I was bringing to her just added to hers. And so I kind of backed off a bit because I could see that she wasn't
in a place
where she could handle that.
Yeah. Makes sense. Yeah.
But I was thankful that Ed was up for the journey with me, because it would have driven me crazy, because it was just so much. And I'm someone who has to talk through things. I just need to talk, and he's an excellent listener. and I always trust and appreciate his thoughts and his opinion. And it made it a lot easier to navigate with him with me.
It's a big deal.
Yeah, because imagine how that would have been for you if he's like, I don't want to hear this.
And if she's on her mission. I know.
And if you're going to go down this path, our marriage may be over. What would that have been like for you if Ed either rejected your attempts to talk about it, or threatened you, or doubled down in his faithfulness?
Yeah.
Which is all very common.
It is very common, and it would have absolutely crushed my heart. But I knew him well enough that I knew he wouldn't do that to me, because I knew he was nuanced enough. And I think that for him, in a lot of ways, it was probably a relief not to have to deal with me and my,
scrupulosity.
Yes, very much so. Because there were times when, I would have Ed give Alli blessings for all of her migraines. And I'm like, why is this not working? Why is this not working? We're taught, well, it's because either the person who's getting it's not faithful, or the person who's giving it's not faithful, or maybe the mother's not faithful. I'm just like, why is this not working? Yeah. So there were definitely times when I blamed him for things not working that I thought should be working.
And in reality, it sounds like the church was giving her headaches because she was lesbian and was trying to stay in the church. And because the priesthood power doesn't heal, it's a combination of that, not because of his lack of faithfulness. Right?
Exactly.
And you're blaming him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I definitely did for a while. I was like, he's, why isn't his priesthood working? But then the other hand was, why aren't my prayers and my fasting working? It's just.
I think that's so interesting, because on a level, what happens is the church conditions the families so that the families now are acting as the church would. Does that make sense?
Yes,
Yeah.
So
it does.
so where we feel shame maybe in a bishop's office or at church, when we go home, we in turn as parents oftentimes have those experiences with our children where then we're shaming them or we're telling them that these are the things they need to do to, you know what I mean, to kind of fix themselves, or we do it to our spouses. And
Yes.
it's just, right? It's just
Yes.
so
Yeah.
interesting how we become, on some level, the vehicles so that when we're away from the church is always there. Like the
Always.
judgment, the conditioning, we become the deliverers of the conditioning.
Yes, always.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So things are heating up on the home front.
Yeah. Yeah. And then
And this is how long ago? This is like a year?
this
year and a half
year
ago?
and a half ago.
Okay.
So Jill came home in November of 2021.
Okay,
And-
wait. So before we get to that,
Well, I started my faith crisis, like my first real, like, no going back in June of 2021.
before she had come home.
she-
So let's talk about what it's like to be two faithful Mormon parents who raised a girl to be an excellent missionary, and then to be thinking, oh my gosh, she's on a mission. What do we do? What are the thoughts that go through your mind in terms of communicating with her while she's on her mission and or fearing her return? And I also want to know, Jill, if you had any foreshadowing, any
Because you're
Yeah.
communicating with her
Right.
now.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah,
now
weekly.
you actually are talking, right? Or
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
talk weekly.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
we'll start with you, Julie. What did you and Ed talk about whether or not you wanted to tell Jill while she was on her mission?
No, that was never anything we even considered
Because?
because she was so close to coming home.
Okay.
And she was so, like, that is not something I could have ever done without being in her presence. Because I knew it was going to break her heart. And I couldn't tell her something like that and have her be that far away from me.
So Jill,
I feel how clear you are on that.
Yeah.
That's really something.
and Jill, can we ask if you can put yourself back in your missionary mindset? You're in Portland, you're serving faithfully, you're having a good mission experience, not knowing that your parents' faith are falling apart. You know, this episode is for people in this exact situation.
Yeah.
Would you, in your case, would you have wanted to know while you were serving your mission, or would you
No.
have not wanted to know?
I think because of where I was at and I was having such a good time and just very happy. I mean, I've always been really close with my parents. But I worry that me being in that kind of environment would have pinned them more as the enemy rather than when I was home and they told me I saw how much it hurt them to tell me. And so no, yeah, I wouldn't have wanted to know.
So you're saying if they had told you while you were a missionary, you might have turned on them as being antagonistic.
Yeah, I worry of that because you're surrounded by either people you're teaching or members or, other missionaries. And
You're in the depths of indoctrination.
yeah, right. And I mean, as much as I love my parents, I worry that could have been something that happened where I kind of looked at them as,
Less.
less and kind of the enemy, everything that I was trying to overcome or help other people overcome. So I'm very grateful that I was able to process that not on a mission, not getting one-sided information.
And maybe something to highlight here is the fact that Jill was having a positive experience on her mission,
Right.
as opposed to if she was suffering, or more like Brinley Jensen really having. And an extra complicator is sometimes the disconnect that happens on a mission, that you can talk every week, but that doesn't mean that people are having authentic conversations about what's really happening too, especially when part of the conditioning is that you should have a successful mission. And if you don't, it's on you. Then it kind of makes up. But I just think that's kind of an important thing maybe to highlight here.
Yeah, and they were never like dishonest with me, if that makes sense. Like I came home the end of November, and so conference was a few weeks before general conference, and I remember like, oh, did you watch conference? They're like a little bit, and I was like, oh, like, did you like it? My mom was like, I was really hoping for more, and I was like, oh,
I'd been hoping for more from conference for years.
So just to tease out a few really important things, because this is some of the most heartfelt, urgent emails or phone calls I receive are from Mormon parents whose kids are on missions, who have lost their faith, and they feel this sense of a moral duty or obligation to tell their kids immediately because they think, I don't want to deceive my kids. I don't want to hide things from my kids. And the value that they're emphasizing is honesty and directness and vulnerability or truth. And those are all legitimate values. But what Margie and I and Natasha, whenever we've done workshops and retreats, we always have to remind people that mature adults don't just like use one value as a billy club. You have to harmonize other values in addition to values like honesty and candor and vulnerability and truth. Yeah. Some of the other values are getting along, family harmony, compassion and respect for your journey.
Right.
And so what there's a couple of things we're teasing out. One is that there's not one answer for every scenario. This was what was best for your scenario, in part because you were loving your mission.
Yeah.
And also she only had 6 months left.
It was so late.
Yeah.
But then also for you, Julie, it was an act of respect and compassion and an instinct to wait.
Yes.
Because that was going to be the most effective thing, even though part of you really wanted to tell her.
Oh, it was killing me. Those last 6 months were agonizing. It was agony because of what you're talking about, because I've never been anything but truthful with Jill. I've never lied to Jill. And I didn't lie to her during those 6 months, but I didn't share anything extra either, So, and I knew as her mom that, and Ed and I discussed it, that no, we just needed to keep going, keep chugging along until she got home. So, and I mean, I was the primary pianist, and it's crazy because we had started, back to church after COVID had started. And I had never in my life recognized the indoctrination that happens in primary like I recognized it going back after having had my brain, my eyes opened and learned so many things. I started hearing everything differently. Yeah. And I left every Sunday because we were keeping up appearances until Jill got home, right? So we were going to church every Sunday, and every Sunday I left church in tears because it was just painful.
Yeah.
And then the knowing what was ahead and not knowing how she would react. And that was some of the hardest months of my life.
What, in your worst fears, what were the things you feared most if you were honest to Jill once she came home and you told her about your loss of Mormon faith? What were you worried might happen?
That she would lose her respect for me, that she would just that I would break her heart. Pretty much my worst fears kind of did happen. It didn't last for long, thank heavens. But it was something that I knew. It was just, there was no way around it. It was going to happen. There was going to be no way around it. We just had to face it head on and get through it.
Mm-hmm. There's one other maybe question I want to ask you, Jill.
Yeah.
separate from whether you might see them as the enemy, what would it have been like? Let's just say you wouldn't have seen them as an enemy, but you would have been informed that your parents no longer believed while you were serving a happy, healthy, faithful mission. What would that have been like to you to be running around Oregon preaching the gospel, knowing your parents back home no longer believed? How would that have been for you on your mission?
Well, I think as a missionary, I put a lot of pressure on myself to be a faith promoter, whether it be people we were teaching or even other missionaries. I definitely felt a big responsibility to be like, hey, like my family isn't the norm, but we make it work. Some of my siblings don't believe and don't go to church, and I do, and it's okay. Like I just felt a lot of responsibility to nurture other people's faiths around me. And you're also just running at a very fast pace as a missionary. And so I think if they would have told me, I think I would have just been so tired. I think I would have been like, oh my goodness, like I'm trying to help out all these other missionaries. I'm trying to help out myself. I'm trying to help out the people we're teaching. And now I have to help my parents too. Like I think it just would have added a lot of responsibility that I felt.
The one thing that I was hoping through this, though, is I knew that Jill trusted Ed and I and trusted our intellect and our decision making, and I just kept hoping and praying that would win out, that her belief in us and in she knows us. She's going to know that this. Eventually, she would know that this was not a quick. Well, even though it was kind of quick, it wasn't quick. It took 10 years, right? But when it finally started happening, it was quick. But just that, hoping that she would hold on to that and know that her dad and I were not just making a ridiculously quick, unthought out decision.
Impulsive.
Yes.
A lot of times, too, I think when it comes to a head like this, what's important or what can make a bit of a difference is the quality of connection in the relationship. So how would you describe at that point the foundation and that connection over years, between each other? And do you think that made a difference kind of in how you were able to work through it?
We had a very firm foundation.
Yeah, definitely. Jill and I have always been, so close, and as well as she has been with Ed. She's had just a really great relationship. She's just been a joy. She's just a wonderful, wonderful kid. And she's just always been a joy that's just added so much to our family. And she's so loving and accepting, and just everyone adores her.
And it sounds like you have had, moments where there was suffering or you were experiencing, really some difficult things, and that you had mentioned, different times of, I feel like through the years. Do you think that helped too, that actually you had communicated before in times of, sadness or loss or, and did that help at all?
Yeah, I think my parents have always been a big pillar for my faith. Going through, with Alli, I remember talking in the car with my mom, her just saying, we don't know everything, and that's okay. Me being like, okay, you're right. Like, we can still cling to our faith, So I think as much as I was my own person, and, they always say you need to have your own testimony, which I did. I very much respected my parents' opinion, and they were always sources of strength for my faith. If like friends at school had questions or things, I would ask them and we'd talk about it. So we'd always talked about things before, questions or things that we didn't know or things that we didn't agree with. That had always been. And also I'm the youngest by like 4 years. So I was like the only child at home all through high school. So yeah, we were able to get very close, have a lot of talks.
And we've kind of already made this point, but I just want to make it really explicit. We've talked to several returned missionaries on Mormon Stories recently who became suicidal on their missions because they were LGBTQ or because they had lost their faith or were having an abusive or a miserable experience. And that is a totally different scenario, because in one family's instance, not disclosing to the missionary might be absolutely the right decision. In another situation, it might be a matter of life and death to disclose.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Versus not. And you wouldn't want to lose a kid on a Mormon mission. And that happens thinking, what if I had told them? And that's what makes this complicated.
It is complicated.
Right? Yeah.
It is complicated. I think the timing was crucial. I think just knowing your child is crucial. Really paying attention to the little things and reading the room, so to speak, when you're communicating with them. Yeah, that was something that we were instructed to do as missionaries when we were talking to our families at home was, we could call them once a week, but it was, talk about the gospel, keep it faith-centered, keep it, faith promoting, talk about the people you're teaching, things like that. And I never did that just because and so I think that was really helpful because we didn't really talk. I mean, we talked about my missionary work, of course, but it was more like, what's going on in your life? Like what's happening. And I think they were able to kind of keep certain things from me because I wasn't always asking them about their testimony or things like that. So I would say if you're a parent that isn't or is struggling with a faith crisis while your child's on a mission and they're just wanting to talk about missionary things, it's probably because that's what they've been instructed to do. But I don't know, just keep them involved in your life. Remind them that you're a person other than in the church, and so ask them personal questions.
Yeah.
I remember asking Jill, how are your spirits doing? How are you feeling? How are you feeling, emotionally? Because that was not something that I did, because when Jamie was on her mission, she could only write letters, and it was very much keeping it to the gospel centered and what was going on in the mission, and not so much, how she was doing. And later on, I found out she wasn't doing okay. She was really struggling. Had I have known that, it would have been helpful.
Exactly.
So. Yeah. Okay. So anything else, Jill, about your mission before coming home?
Yeah, I would say just a couple things. Like mentioned, I had a great mission experience, but I did kind of, even though they didn't disclose everything, I did kind of wonder towards the end, like I remember having that thought once, like, I don't know if my parents are going to be active my whole life, and that's like, never would have thought I would think that, but my last transfer on my mission, me and my companion baptized a non-binary person. And I was so excited. It was so good. And I was like, yes, like this is the change that the church is needing, and like so cool to be a part of this. I was so excited. And I remember it was P-Day, and I called my dad and like told him, and I thought he'd be so excited, like maybe one day his daughter will feel comfortable again in the church. Like I was like, yes, this is the beginning. And I remember he was just like, oh, that's great. Like he wasn't very excited. And I was like, why are you not more excited about this? Like this is a big step. And
what do you think he was thinking?
I don't know. He's probably thinking that it's probably not best for that person. I don't know what he was thinking.
Well, it's hard to be LGBTQ and to be Mormon, frankly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So he's probably worried about how that's going to be for them in the long run.
Yeah.
I think he was happy for Jill and her success, but again, had that in the back of his mind that, is that the best thing for this person type of a deal.
And so I remember, there were a few things. And towards the end of my mission, I had a great experience. I loved it, but I was terrified of going inactive when I got home. Like so scared because I'd seen
Was that foreshadowing in your mind?
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
She had vocalized that to me. Yeah.
Well, because my brother had a great experience and then he left. And, they would talk about that on the mission. Like, half of you won't be active in 5 years, They'd like tell you that. And it's like, whoa, like, but it's not going to be me, like, so I was very scared that might happen to me. And I remember my last interview with my mission president before I came home. I talked to him about that. I was like, I'm so scared I'm going to go home and leave the church. Like I loved this experience and everything, but it's, it's different now, and
you didn't know about your parents at this point.
No.
Yeah.
No. And so I remember his advice he gave me. He was, he'd been a bishop and a stake president for years. And he's like, I've interviewed a lot of people. And he's like, if you read your scriptures every day, go to the temple twice a month, and attend church regularly, he's like, I've never seen anything more than a solid, faithful member if you do those things.
Oops.
And I was like, okay, perfect. So I was like, that's what I'm going to do, because I didn't know my parents, but I knew myself, and I knew I had questions and some things hadn't been answered yet. And I don't know, I was really scared that was going to happen to me.
I didn't know this. I would have been much more relieved had I known all that. I would have been like, okay.
Well, I'm thinking back to my faith crisis, and I was teaching seminary at the time. There's something true about what your mission president's saying, in that once you start having a faith crisis, reading the Book of Mormon or the Doctrine and Covenants isn't helpful, because you read D&C 132 with new eyes, or you read the Curse of the Lamanites with different eyes. You don't want to read your scriptures anymore. And when you do, it doesn't help your faith. So when you're trying to save your faith, all of a sudden you stop reading your scriptures, almost in an attempt to save your faith. Mm-hmm. And so in that way, it's prophetic, because look, she stopped reading her scriptures.
Yeah.
So, in that sense, it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy that a mission president might make, in my experience.
Yeah.
But you knew, in your mind, you left thinking, well, I know the way. I know the way to make sure
like,
I never.
Okay, yeah,
you've got this.
Served a good mission. We're going to keep going. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else about finishing up your mission?
No.
Okay.
Just that I had a great time.
Yeah.
It was the best. And I am so grateful for my mission president and his wife and all of the sacrifice that they made for me and the other missionaries. And I honestly just had a really positive experience. Yeah. And I know it's because of that.
I'm grateful for her mission president and his wife. They were awesome. And I was so glad that Ed and I got the chance to meet them. It was kind of interesting though. She idolized them, and her love and that for them also worried me, because I'm like, oh, what am I going to look like to her now? Because they were the ones that were up there on that pedestal.
Yeah, they were goals.
Yeah, they were goals, and now I was going to be so I would be not being honest if I didn't say that worried me.
That is so real. That makes all the sense. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So were you guys terrified at the idea of her coming home? What were you feeling? I don't want to cede the answer. So what, Julie, were you and Ed feeling about Jill coming home?
We were very nervous as to how, and then kind of the timing was a little crazy, because she came home like right before Thanksgiving, and we had family coming from out of state for Thanksgiving, so I didn't want to ruin Thanksgiving. And then everyone was coming back to town for Christmas, so we could all be together as a family for Christmas.
Yes, that timing.
Yeah,
it
was tricky timing,
Yeah.
and so I didn't want to ruin Christmas.
That's right.
So made the decision that
You told me in between Thanksgiving and Christmas.
Did I tell you then?
Yeah.
Okay, I can see. I've already forgot. I made it through Thanksgiving. Mm-hmm. And I was going to try and make it through Christmas. That's right. But I couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it. I had to. I just had to. I think maybe I made it to one more sacrament meeting after Jill's homecoming talk. Was it one?
I don't even know.
I think it was one more, because it was where you saw me visibly upset when they were telling
That was
everybody?
the one before my homecoming.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So no, her homecoming talk would have been the last time I went then
Okay.
to church.
So now we're talking about timing. When's the right time? Almost there's never a right time,
No.
right?
No.
Yeah.
It's just the right time is whenever you get up the courage.
So let me ask Jill, when you got home,
Yeah.
were there any signs of cracks?
Like,
or
did
not?
you notice? Did you feel any nervousness or tension, or were you? Because you're also
Yeah.
integrating into
Right. Yeah.
There's a
into
lot
regular
going on.
life. Yeah. I remember like walking in and seeing a coffee pot on the table, and I was like, "Oh, that's interesting," you know. But I mean, at that time, you didn't even drink coffee, so
No.
she was just. I was like, "Oh, what's that?" You know, and she's like, "Oh, well, I want your siblings to feel comfortable when they're in our home, and they like coffee, so when they come to visit, I figure it's fine." And I was like, "Yeah, you're right." You know,
I hadn't had coffee yet.
yeah. So, I mean, there was like things that I was just like, okay, like they're much more open about. And then it was only like a day or two after I got home, my best friend flew in to see me. And we were driving up to the airport to pick her up. And that was like the first time that my mom really said anything. And she was like, like I've been
You
listening.
kind of started it with the miracle forgiveness.
Oh, that's right.
What happened?
So on my mission, my last two transfers, one of the families that we baptized their two little girls, they were like great, and I thought they were very progressive. It was a interracial family, and their daughters were older than 8, but they wanted it to be their decision to be baptized, so they didn't push it on them at all. And so when we got there, we taught them and they got baptized, and the dad gave me the book, The Miracle of Forgiveness, and I'd never heard of it. And he's like, "It's a really great book. Like, you should read it." And I was like, "Okay, yeah, I'll read it," And so I started reading it, and I was like, whoa, like, this is intense, And like, even as a missionary, I remember sitting there and the part where he talks about, it's better to die than to give away your virtue. And I remember like looking over at my companion being like, that's crazy. Like this prophet saying it would be better for you to kill yourself than
to allow yourself to be raped.
to allow yourself to be
So
raped.
this is Spencer W. Kimball, Mormon prophet, when I was growing up, who wrote this book called Miracle Forgiveness, which up until just a few years ago, Deseret Book was still selling. There's actually a Mormon Stories episode where we call on Deseret Book to stop selling this book. And eventually they have. It's no longer in print. It's no longer sold by Deseret Book. But it's caused decades and decades and decades of pain and suffering and even suicide.
Right.
Or suicidality, because it condemns homosexuality as a perversion. It teaches that masturbation leads to homosexuality, and it makes sexual sin seem so dark and terrible, next to murder,
Yeah.
that it's really hurt a lot of people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, on my mission, I was reading it, and the homosexuality part and the, better to kill yourself than to lose your virtue. I was just like, whoa, this doesn't really sit well with me. And I remember I went over to that family's house again, and he's like, "How are you liking the book?" And I was like, it's okay. Like, it's kind of intense. Like, you can tell it's pretty outdated because of some of the things it says, And he was like, "Well, just keep reading it till the end." Like, he's like, it all kind of comes together. And I was like, okay. And I never finished it. So, but yeah, that's right. We were in the car driving to go get my friend, and I brought up that I'd read that, and my mom was like, "You've read that book?"
I was shocked.
Yeah, I was like, "Yeah, I got on my mission," And so we kind of got on that topic, and I was like, "Where are you at with that?" And she was like, like, I don't remember much of what she said. The one thing that really stuck out to me though was I was like, "Well, how's your relationship with Jesus? Like, do you at least, like, I don't really care where you're at with anything, but like, please tell me you still like have a relationship with Jesus."
So you were starting to, you could tell.
Yeah.
Something had changed.
Yeah. And I remember she just like kind of sighed and was like, I believe in him, but it's a much different relationship than it ever has been before. And I was like, okay. And then we picked up my friend, and so we couldn't really talk about that anymore. for a while, and the next couple days were good, and then we went to church for the first time since I'd been home. And so it was me and my best friend and my mom and dad, and we're sitting in church, and they read a letter from the stake president, and it was just kind of it was a invitation to the families to start reading the Family Proclamation every night as a family.
Not only reading it, studying it.
Studying and reading it. And I remember I was sitting there, and I had kind of learned a little bit, because on my mission, so I was allowed Facebook, right, because of COVID Missionary. That's kind of what you did. And then I was a YSA missionary, so we were also allowed Instagram. So I was on Instagram, and so you could follow like faith promoting things. So I started following Dr. Julie Hanks on my mission. And I remember her talking about the Family Proclamation and how, it was really just kind of propaganda to help the church fight same-sex marriage. And so I kind of heard that. And so when they invited families to read and study it, my mom noticeably was just kind of like shaking in her chair, like getting uncomfortable. And I just like reached over and gave her
I was having a physical response to that.
Because this is the church's document that they released, I don't know, 20, 30 years ago, basically saying marriage is between a man and a woman, basically saying no transgender stuff, no gender fluidity, no homosexuality. Women
Gender
should stay in the
roles, yeah.
home.
Yep.
Yeah.
Men should be the providers. Women should be the nurturers of the children.
Yeah.
And what did you like about all that by that point, Julie?
For starters, to back up a bit, my daughter Alli had grown up with a big, pretty picture of that hanging in our home.
And having migraines the whole time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So after I found out where it came from and just realized about it, it made me almost physically ill because of what it had done to her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I saw her squirming in her chair, and I was like, okay, something's off,
Yeah.
So
There was something. Huh?
yeah, something.
Anyway.
Yeah. Okay. So you didn't study it daily
No.
as a family?
No, in fact, I went home and I scheduled an appointment with the stake president because I wanted that out of the stake flyer. I wanted him to understand that that was hurting people and that it was damaging. And I didn't like seeing that in the ward flyer and the stake flyer every week.
But for an Orthodox Mormon, the proclamation on the family is doctrine in Scripture, even though it's never been canonized, which Orthodox Mormons should wonder, why has it not been canonized? Even though it's never been canonized, to your stake president, it's like, what are you talking about? This is like one of the most important pieces of Scripture in all of Mormonism.
Yeah, I went, and I still love our stake president. He's a wonderful person. And we visited for 2 hours. He and I did. And I just shared, he was very aware of where I was at the end of that. And I just told him, I said, you can't, I really wish you wouldn't put this in anymore. I really wish this wasn't a thing that's damaging to people, and it's still in there. So that hasn't changed. And that's, but he was very loving. He was very understanding. He even shared some very personal stories with me of his own family. And he let me know that he hoped that I wouldn't lose my faith, that I wouldn't, leave. And, but I knew after that trying to stay in and make any changes, I didn't feel like it was going to be worth my time. So.
And Jill, did you know your mom was like protesting to the stake president at this point?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah, she told me. Yeah.
So then how are you realizing what's changed with your parents?
I was just doing everything my stake president or mission president had told me to. Because I'd always, you know, you always hear like when you come back from the mission, that's when Satan really tries to get you, you know? And so I was like, okay. So I started working at the temple and, you know, attending the YSA as a Sunday school teacher. It's like a substitute seminary teacher, just kind of threw myself in because I knew that they were going through this and
Kind of doubling down.
yeah.
She was. Yep. And I forgot to share that during the time I'm in my faith crisis, I got asked about being a seminary teacher and a temple worker. And, you know, I respectfully declined both of those. But, you know, I did understand very clearly then that the discernment and, you know, just was not there.
But Jill, I'm thinking back to the end of your mission. Your biggest fear was that you were going to fall away, and now you're coming home and your parents are falling away. So you're doubling down. Mm-hmm. What was that like for you?
Like we said before, like my parents and I have always been very close, and I loved them. And I tried to make sure that they were aware of that once they sat down and told me.
Did you talk about that yet or not?
No.
Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, we can talk about that.
Yeah, so we remember a little differently. It's funny
so you
how
can each tell your version.
Yeah. It's kind of funny how when you go through something that's traumatic to your brain, things that stick out and you kind of remember things differently. So for me, I sat Jill down at the table one day and I just thought I have just got to tell her because I literally physically cannot go to church another Sunday. I cannot do it for my own. And this was kind of a crazy thing for me too, because as a Mormon mother and just, you know, you never put yourself first or your feelings first. So taking this step for me and being true to myself and just saying, no, I just can't do that. I cannot do that anymore was something that was foreign to me as a mother. But so I sat her down and I just said, Jill, I said, you know, at least what I meant to convey and what I was saying in my head was that I, you know, could no longer support the church that didn't accept my daughter. And I left it at that. I didn't bother her with all the other stuff I had found out.
CS letter stuff.
Yeah, because for me, I've been angry at myself because that should have been reason enough for me to leave. And I'm not proud of myself that it wasn't. That I just held on and held on and held on.
So Alli should have been enough.
Yeah. And so anyway, I that was the full reason I gave her, which was the first reason, but it wasn't the whole reason, obviously, or I would have left 10 years sooner. But I figured that's all she really needed to know at that point, because I knew she could understand. She could understand that.
Yeah. Yeah, so I remember she told me that, and I was like, okay, you know, I understand. You know, I love you. I'm sorry. You know, so I feel like it was a good heart to heart, you know, that we had. But in my mind, like, thank you. In my mind, she was still, I understood why she wasn't going to church. But that didn't mean she didn't believe in temple work. You know, that didn't mean she didn't believe in all of in the Book of Mormon. You know, it was like
authority.
Yeah, like it makes sense. I understand why you're not comfortable in the church and why you don't want to go or support it. But surely you still have that, you know. And so I think that's kind of what I thought for a while. Well, for a few days, and then
Did you have another conversation?
Yeah, and then we had another conversation, and I was just kind of mad. I was just mad because I felt like I had given my all for 18 months. And instead of finding an answer for my sister, I was losing my entire family. And I was mad at them because I was like, how can you do this? You know, you taught me my whole life that this is the truth and this is the way. And I was shocked, you know, to hear my mom say that she didn't believe in the temple or the blessings there anymore. Like it, and my dad, you know, they just shared with me, just that they didn't believe anything anymore. And it was like, whoa. Because in my mind, like, yeah, they didn't believe or they didn't want to go to church, but like, they know it's true. Like, how can you not know it's true? And I remember after they talked to me, I like called one of my mission companions. She was home too. And I was just like, I don't know how they're going to make it. Like, how are they going to financially survive without paying tithing? You know, like, they're going to be so unhappy. You know, I was just like, I was so worried for them and so mad at them too for leaving.
And we felt it. It was hard. It was excruciating.
Yeah. Can I just say in this moment, you had mentioned kind of this shift for you around your own need, you know, and being a mom where you're so defined by other, you know, your other people's needs, but mainly your children's needs. And then having it come like a head-to-head here where it's not just you naming a need or showing up for a need for yourself, but knowing that by meeting that need, you're hurting your child.
Yes.
So it's like this total values conflict that comes to a head. I just want to honor how tough that is in that moment, and also honor the previous kind of thing about, you know, this moment of using your own voice too, and going into a place of authority, a person of authority, and saying, yeah, I get you're an authority, and I'm going to say, I still think this is wrong. Yeah. You know, those are really big moments, you know,
they were
given
huge.
Your story.
They were huge moments for me because I don't know, because it was not my character. Yeah. I was a people pleaser.
Yeah. It's like a new piece of you or a new part of you being born.
Yes.
In that moment.
Absolutely. Yep. But I knew I wasn't going to be any good to my children if I didn't follow what I knew now. So.
And the perspective differences are so profound because from your perspective, Jill, you're worrying like, are my parents ever going to be okay?
Yeah.
They're lost and they're never going to be okay.
Exactly. There's nowhere but downhill from here.
And I knew that's how she was feeling, right? Because that's how I felt about Tom.
Yeah.
I knew, you know.
But from your perspective, Julie, you weren't falling, right?
No.
What was it from your perspective?
From my perspective, I was having a rebirth. I was becoming, well, so I don't know if you guys have ever seen this show Arrested Development, but it's something we quite enjoy. But anyway, Ed and I were talking one day and we just realized that, or I told him, I said, you know, it's arrested development in the church. We get to a certain point and then that's it. We stop. We don't. And so I was feeling a renewed love of life, love of learning, love of possibilities. I was just so grateful. Like, I will forever be grateful that I have a gay child, because this would not have happened. It wouldn't have happened, you know? And it's amazing how, you know, you're taught that to love everyone and everything in the church. But it was after experiencing all of this that I felt just an amazing amount of love for humanity in general. Just like my whole heart just was like expanded. And I just was so open to learn and to hear and to, you know, no longer did I think that everyone needed to know what I know and to be happy. And I was just, no, it was amazing. And once I learned the truth, it didn't take me long. Like, I had been under so much mental torment from everything about Satan, from pressure about perfect children, and just trying to keep my family together, trying to make things work, so much pressure that when I learned the truth, I literally ran out the door. And it was like a tremendous weight had been lifted off my shoulders.
You ran out the door of your house?
No, I ran out the proverbial door of the church.
Okay.
Like,
John's
I'm sure I ran out the door.
Our neighbors were.
You ran out what
The neighbors
door?
were like, what's going on? No.
It's so cinematic. I like imagining you running down the
I'm like a
street.
literature major. I'm there the whole way. I'm like, she's running out that door.
You know, you hear how some people. Well, I know that. For instance, I've heard enough about your story that you guys stayed in for a long time, you know, and we're trying to make it work. And for me, like I feel like I stayed in a long time trying to make it work too. But when I finally learned the truth, I had a short time of feeling like I suffered a death. And I was very familiar with that because there's been a lot of that in my life. And I had a short time of feeling that void. But then the immense amount of relief and freedom that came upon me, it was just like, I am out of here. And I am happy about it.
Yeah.
It was an awakening. It was enlightenment.
It was huge.
It was maturity and growth.
And growth, yes.
And empowerment.
Very much so, empowerment.
Yeah.
Very much so.
And
Yes.
to Jill, it was
The worst.
what a contrast in perspectives,
hard.
right?
Yeah,
And from each of your perspectives, it's truth.
That's right. They're
exactly.
both true.
We're both following the truth.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing you're not feeling this as an awesome thing as your mom's.
No, I remember them saying that though. I remember when they talked to me, they were like, don't worry. Like, really,
We're
I
great.
am so happy right now. You know, I'm the happiest I've been. And I was like, whatever, you don't know true happiness, you know? And so, yeah, I just kind of, it took a little bit, but then just kind of accepted it. And I was like, okay, yeah, like I see where they're coming from with a lot of this, but for me, it works. You know, I liked being the Mormon, you know, in my friend group at school. Like, I liked being different. I felt like I said earlier, I just kind of fit into the mold really well. And also I liked who I was. I was like, I'm happy with who I am becoming as a person, and that's because of the church. And so I saw where they were coming from, and kind of what kept me hanging on for a while was, well, but for me, this works. For me, this is good. And it was,
How long did you go like that?
well, not too long.
Well, but Jill, it was a few months that she just like, I felt, and you can say if I'm wrong, but I just felt absolute, I knew she loved me. I never didn't feel like Jill loved me, but I just knew she didn't want to be around me and she didn't really like seeing me. And
So it drove a wedge.
Oh yeah. And I could feel that, and it just like, it broke my heart. Cause I just knew, I'd broke her heart, and it was breaking my heart. And I just thought, is she ever going to want to be around me again? She moved out right after this went down, and I hardly ever saw her. When I did see her, she was not the same Jill.
Yeah.
And it was hard.
It is
And did you
hard.
move out because of this?
Yeah.
Why did you move out?
It was just hard to be around. I've always loved my parents, and that love never went away, but it was just hard to see them because I was worried. And so
Worried about what?
their salvation, I was worried. And I was also worried that it was going to tear me down too, So I felt like I loved them, and I made sure that they knew that. But I'm sure I was different because I didn't want to see that life. I didn't want to hear it. I didn't want to do anything that would hurt my testimony.
I mean, in a way, is it like, did it feel like they were now a bit of a danger? Not by trying to be a danger, but just because of what you had been told
Right.
about, right? The risk when you get home.
Yeah.
Did it feel like that?
Yeah. Yeah, I was worried. And like, I loved them, but I didn't want to be around them.
And we felt it.
It's painful, yeah.
Yeah. And so, I kept holding on for dear life, doing what I thought I needed to do. And, I'd had questions, obviously, along the way. But one really big thing for me was one of my mission companions was getting home from her mission. And, well, we actually got home the same time, but her homecoming talk wasn't for like a month until after she'd gotten home. And she lives in Utah, and so I was like, I want to go to the homecoming, and my brother lives here. And so I flew down for the weekend and went to the homecoming, and we went to like lunch right before I flew out, and I just was like, we were talking about it a little bit. And I was just like, why did you leave, Tom? I felt like at that point I'd heard Mom and Dad's reasons, and I wanted to know why he left. And, he just looked at me and he said, Jill, my whole life, the church has been set up for me to succeed. He's like, I'm a heterosexual white male, that's exactly, I had all the opportunities in the world with the church. I had, all these things. And so kind of what it sounded like to me was he was saying the church worked for me, right? Which I was kind of telling myself, other people can leave, but the church works for me. But then he said, but that same organization, that same, philosophy, that the teachings almost killed my sister. And he's like, I can't just sit there and reap the rewards of something that's so damaging to others. And that was like, whoa. Because that had kind of been my whole reasoning too. Like, yeah, other people can do whatever they want, but this is good for me. And then to realize how thoughtful and caring my brother was to say, it doesn't matter what it's doing to me. What is it doing to other people? And I was like, wow, you're right. So that was a big thing for me, hearing him say that. And I went on for, a month or so, just kind of kept going. Kept going to church and teaching and things like that. And then one day I was at work And I saw like on social media that Brad Wilcox had given a talk in Alpine, and he'd gotten a lot of hate for it. And I was like, well, what is this about? Like on my mission, I'd read his talk, like the continuous atonement or I don't know, something about the atonement. It's like one of his most popular talks, and I loved that talk. It was a talk that like my sister showed to me. She's like, I loved this on my mission, so I read it a bunch and I loved it. And I knew Brad Wilcox's name from that talk, and so when I heard that there was something going on there, I was like, oh, like, well, what did he say? Like, I want to know. And I wanted to kind of, I don't know, I just wanted to see what everyone was bothered by. So I was at work and I could like listen to podcasts or music in my ear. And I was like, I'm sure someone's done a podcast about this. And I knew Mormon stories from my mom, And yeah, you guys had just like a day before or something. It was you and Gerardo and Kara.
We broke the story because someone from Alpine leaked to us the video, and so we shared it. Yeah.
Yeah. And
this is last year, 2022.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, February of 2022.
Yeah, exactly a year ago. Yeah. And so I listened to it, and I don't know, I feel like it was heartbreaking, but at the same time, like relieving, because it was like, I almost, like the church had done a lot of good for me, but it had been a lot of pain as well. And I was just holding on for dear life. And in my head, I remember thinking like, I just need like a big scandal to like justify me leaving, And so I listened to your podcast, and you break it down. You talk about, what he said, and then you talk about it and like what's wrong with the church.
Do you remember what he said that was particularly offensive to you, just by chance?
So I re-listened to it before we were coming on, because I knew that was a big part. And it wasn't much of what he said, but it was everything that you three brought to light in that, if that makes sense.
Oh, so it was us, not him? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it was more so like,
I mean, I'll just say one of the things he said was Mormons need to stop asking why black people didn't receive the priesthood until 1978. They should start asking why white people didn't receive the priesthood until 1830.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's one of them.
Yeah, that's one of them. And
he also talked about other churches being
not
like
being the full piano.
Being like a couple keys on a piano, but the Mormon church is like the full piano.
Yeah, there were a few things, and as I was listening to that talk, I remember my dad, when they explained how when they had left, a big shelf breaker for them was Holland's BYU talk about the musket talk.
That was like Ed had stayed nuanced forever, but that talk was what brought him.
Yeah.
He was like, that's it. He was done after that talk.
Yeah, and I remember when he told me, he was leaving, he was like, a man that is called of God is supposed to represent Jesus Christ, the Prince of Peace. He's standing there and he's making, these statements like pointing a gun at my daughter, He was like, I can't.
Proverbial musket fire, but what that insinuated.
Yeah. And I was like, wow, yeah, And so I remember when I was sitting there listening to Brad Wilcox talk, I was thinking about like what my dad had said, like, can I imagine a man of God sitting there poking fun at other people's religions like that? It made me think back to on my mission, that couple that was so great and they were Christian. And I was like, I don't know, I was just so disrespectful to them, and just, it was like a 12-year-old was talking. I was like, how is this okay? I was like, there's no way a man that's called of God, there's no way I can picture God saying this. And so And then in that podcast, you guys mentioned, you talked about patriarchal blessings and how it's kind of just self-fulfillment prophecy. And I was like, oh, I never really thought about it that way. Or like, of course, a young man thinks that they're, that it's from God when his patriarchal blessing says there's like sexual tendencies. It's like, well, what young man or woman doesn't? You were just bringing to light a lot of things. And then you mentioned the CES letter, and I was like, well, what's that?
I must not have mentioned that.
No, she's very respectful. And so then by that point I was like, okay, like, let's just figure this out. Because I was tired. I was sick of, just chugging along and holding on. I was like, I want to know what my family knows. I don't know. I didn't want to be a blind follower. And so, yeah, it was seriously like in a week, I like listened to that. I listened to another podcast where it was conversion therapy going on at BYU. I read the CES letter. I read, like, I don't know, I just delve into it. And I was like, I was so overwhelmed because I had gotten home in November and this was happening in February.
Wow, yeah.
It's crazy.
And so I was just like, whoa, I need to take a step back. So I just kind of decided I wouldn't go to church that week, just kind of figure things out. And I just never went back after that. So,
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So thank you, Brad Wilcox.
Yeah.
Mormon stories.
Yeah, and Mormon stories for real. And my family.
But that was
And Alli.
rough.
Alli.
I just have to say this, that, never in the history of Mormon stories has one day had such a profound resonance with the world than the Brad Wilcox kind of week.
Oh,
you look at our YouTube views and statistics, and it was really solidly growing. But the Brad Wilcox week was such a spike in our stats that it made the rest of our 15 years on YouTube look like a tiny line at the bottom because the spike in viewership. The church will never fully recover from the damage that Brad Wilcox did to the church. I don't think they have any idea
No, that was huge.
how bad Brad Wilcox hurt the Mormon church.
That was huge. I remember, obviously I was out by then, but I was just, I couldn't believe it. I was stunned. It was
And it
stunning.
wasn't new.
No,
it's
it
stuff
was
that
not.
Brad Wilcox and other people have been saying. They've been saying the quiet part in secret behind closed doors for centuries, decades, if not over a century.
Yeah.
It's just that with the internet, it leaked out.
Yep.
Everyone
And then there was
saw
someone
it.
around to share it with the world.
Yeah.
And the quiet things got said publicly.
Yeah. And a voice, it very much helped you guys pausing it and talking about what was so wrong with it. I feel like that was very helpful because I still think, I'd heard things like that before, but you just like the Doctrine and Covenants 132, you read it before, but you don't really have the eyes to see it or the ears to hear it. And so someone pointing out, hey, this is really damaging and this is why, it was like, whoa.
Or even just seeing it online, watching it instead of being there physically. Because I think when you're in that meeting physically, you are in the herd mentality, right? And if someone's laughing, you're going to laugh. Oh, he was funny, and you're not really, you don't hear it and you're not thinking it through.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Shout out to Gerardo and Kara. They were a part of that too.
Yeah.
That was an important.
Yeah, it was
moment.
very important.
Very good.
Very important.
Yeah. And we're releasing our interview with Nate Bird today, who's one of the Black Menaces.
Oh,
And that's what created the Black Menaces.
Yes.
Was the Brad Wilcox talk.
yeah.
So I mean, like, we're just now in 2023 really starting to see the ripples
Yeah.
of
it.
the impact of that talk. Anyway,
Yeah.
not to belabor the point. Okay. So
One
go
thing
ahead.
I was going to say that I just kind of want to honor the courage and the nature of relationship, it sounds like, that you have with your brother. Was this that you had the courage, as scared as you were and as overwhelmed as you were, coming home from your mission and kind of holding, that, I don't know, that thread, or that you asked him anyway. You asked him directly. And that just says a lot for your relationship with him and your trust in him. And it's just, it's really special. And then another thing that strikes me too is just your earnestness in how you describe on your mission, having this question of like, how do I reconcile, Alli, how do I reconcile this with, this other side that
the Christian couple.
No, I was talking about actually Alli, holding that question in your heart. You were saying that you were holding that question and waiting for something to come on your mission that made you feel at closure, at peace, or reconciled. And it didn't, you really, on some level, what I'm hearing is it stayed open-ended through. And then you get home and you have a talk with your mom who gives you a little Alli point, right? And then you have Tom. Then you have Tom's Alli point.
Yeah.
And then you have that video.
Yeah.
And you're like, this question, I've got nothing from this side. I've got a whole lot of incoming from this side, right?
That's the answer. It's okay.
You were getting answers, but maybe not from where you expected.
Not the sources I wanted.
Yeah.
The answer was the church was wrong about LGBT people.
Yeah.
Full stop.
Yeah. Like my mom, like it was like, I don't know, once I figured that out, it was just like a huge relief. So sad, so sad to feel like you're losing a part of yourself, but in another way, such a relief.
Yes.
Because like these feelings that I'd had forever were finally, I don't know, being validated and being like, yeah, that's not right. And you were correct in thinking that wasn't good. It was just like, oh.
Yeah, and it's kind of like what Julie was saying, where it's enough. Yeah. That alone is enough.
Yes.
And you ran out of the house metaphorically.
I did. Yeah. Maybe a little too fast. I went from 0 to 100 and then back to 0.
It's been quite a ride.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what was that like? How did you tell your family?
I asked my parents to come to dinner with me, and I kind of talked to them about everything. And I think and it was after I had read the CES letter and after I'd listened to that. And I remember talking to them being like, that's when I said it. That's when I was like, I wish there was just some giant scandal that would, like all my friends and family that was still active that would come out in the church so that they would understand why, And I remember my mom was like, well, would it help you if I told you there are, there have been scandals, And I was like, yeah, So I just think we just went to dinner and I just told them everything that I told you guys and they apologized. They were like, I know this is so hard. We've been through it. And, if you ever want to, they just gave me support either way. They said, if you, choose to stay, that's okay. There's a lot of good, and if you choose to leave, that's okay too. That was very helpful.
So it wasn't like a victory dance spiking the football.
No.
And it wasn't like, you got to get out of there. They still kept it open-ended.
Yeah. Everybody's on their own journey, on their own time.
Yeah.
Last thing I want to do is hurt anyone and cause them to, because it's a journey that I am so grateful that I've taken, but it's also a very tough journey.
Yeah.
What was that like for you, Julie, to hear Jill say she kind of had arrived at where you had
Absolute relief. Absolute relief. Then at that point, there was only one more kid. One more kid. Well, at that point, you know, our daughter Jamie, it was her husband that then was someone we needed to tell, because we had tried to like tell everyone individually. And so and we didn't tell anyone, like no extended family or friends or community, until we had told all of the kids. And so our son-in-law was the next person we told, and that was a hard one, because he, you know, is very faithful, and we didn't know how that was going to go. But as it worked out, our daughter Jamie had flown to Utah for her friend's wedding, and we had to move out of our rental, and so we were staying for a couple weeks with them at their house until our house got finished. And so it was just Ed and I and our son-in-law one Sunday. So we just kind of set him down and told him we had something we wanted to share with them, and told him that we had, you know, it's been a long journey, but we'd made the decision that we were going to walk away from the church. We were not going to participate in it anymore, but that we didn't want him to feel threatened in any way, that we would be 100% supportive of whatever direction they took their family in. You know, we would show up for baptism. We would respect them as parents. You know, we do whatever, but it was important for him to know where we were at and to be honest with him. And it went really well. He was very curious. He asked a lot of questions, which I really appreciated, because that's not the experience usually. And he's like, well, you know, I just don't want, you know, he was concerned a little bit, but there was no way he would ever keep us away from our grandbabies or anything. And he just made it clear that, you know, he was going to stay in and whatnot. And we were good with that. But so anyways, we were just very, very happy that went so well, and that now the anxiety of telling everyone was over.
Yes, right. It's a big one.
Uh-huh.
Other than, you know, the rest
Everyone
of our
else.
family, other than our friends and everyone, that it was going to shock completely. But the way Ed and I went about that is we told our siblings individually. We called them and told them, and then we worked on a Facebook post that we posted together. I just didn't want anything to be awkward. I just wanted to get it out there. Didn't want the rumor mill going, you know, wanted us to be in charge of that information. So that's what we did.
So you and Ed came out on Facebook to the rest of the world?
Together.
Wow.
We made a post together.
And how was that received? So that's for not immediate family. That's for
That was
extended family, and then
and friends
church
and everybody else. Yeah. And it went, I was impressed. I mean, I was amazed. Well, you know, we've been very blessed with really incredible friends, and really we both have wonderful families, and everybody was very loving. There was a couple comments of, "Oh, I'm sad for you." But other than that, it was just all, "We love you," you know, and very, very supportive. And so I was very grateful for that, because I knew I was prepared. You know, I was prepared to not hear just that. So it was actually very well received. I was pleasantly and thankfully surprised.
in some sense, you were lucky. And in some sense, by 2022, 2023, this is starting to become more and more of a common thing.
Yeah.
So people are getting more and more used to this. And I guess Mormons are getting a little bit better about treating people kindly when it happens.
Absolutely.
You know, something that was important for me, when we built our new house, we were moving into what was going to be a different ward. And our very good friend is the bishop of that ward. And his wife and I are really good friends, and we served in Young Women's for years together. And I didn't want to ever start going to church in that ward. And so, but it was really important for me to tell them personally. So we invited them out to dinner and shared with them that, you know, because I know my friend was excited for me to be moving into her ward and to have me to, you know, set with and, you know, be, and I knew that was going to be a shock. And, you know, but they were very loving and supportive and, well, it was loving. I don't know. Then shocked, I think.
Not supportive.
Well, they've just been, but they're just really great people. And I have a lot of love and admiration for them. So that was another tough one.
Yeah, you have been leaning into having some uncomfortable conversations in this process.
Yes. Yes. There's been several of those.
It's amazing.
And walking that tightrope with wanting people to know you and where you're at now, but not wanting to insult their beliefs or, you know.
Or harm them.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You don't, because it's not an easy process. And I don't think you can really understand that unless you've been deep in a religion or something like this. You can't even comprehend it.
So if you had to describe your happiness individually and your family cohesion as a family and your connectedness or closeness after, let's start with just how you're doing in terms of individual health and happiness. We'll start with you, Julie.
So good. No, I
Because there's a tendency as ex-Mormons to want to reassure everyone we're happier than ever.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, because everyone's expecting your life to completely fall apart because that's what's supposed to happen when you're not in the church, right? And I mean, life is still life, but personally, just I am so much happier. Like I mentioned before, the weight of the world has just been lifted off my shoulders. Like I no longer feel scared and afraid of what Satan's going to do to me or what's going to happen to my children. I mean, now I know that Ed and I got them here to earth and this is for them to experience and we're there to love and support them. But what they choose to do is not my responsibility. And
that's a relief, huh?
Yeah, it's and I love them and I love the people they are, and I'm so proud of them. And it's been a hard journey for all of us, but it's been a journey. I feel like we were close, but it's been a journey that's brought us even closer, and you know, I've just been very, very thankful that I honestly feel the whole world has opened up to me. It's just been the most amazing feeling. I would love for everyone to feel like I feel now. You know, the path that got me there was rough. I'm not wishing that on anybody, but the way I feel now is wonderful.
It's almost like you've partaken of the fruit of the tree and you want others to partake of it.
Yeah, that's a good way
Different
to put
tree.
it.
Just kidding.
No, the tree of knowledge of good and evil,
Good and evil.
right?
Absolutely. Yes.
And you desire all to partake.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I would just kind of echo everything that my mom said. I mean, because since then, our whole family is kind of on the same page with everything. You know, my brother-in-law and sister have stepped away as well, and I mean, I thought we were close before, but like it's been so cool to see how close we are now with everyone. It's, you know, I always thought it was amazing that we could have such a good relationship with my sister, even that despite, you know, our religious beliefs. And I think that's been one of the coolest things. We went on a family vacation and my mom just went out. She's like, isn't it so good to see Alli so happy? I was like, yeah, you know, like even, I don't think she ever doubted how much we loved her, but even now seeing us and kind of where we're at now, I think has, I hope, given her kind of a relief as well. And that's felt across our whole family, I would say. We're all doing really, really well, really happy. And it's been cool for me. I think I'm grateful for this to happen now because I haven't really committed to a family or a husband or anything, you know? And so, and I didn't realize how much I was putting on marriage until I left. Mm-hmm. And now it's like, what do I want to do? You know, like me as a person, like what do I want to accomplish? You know, I just feel like my life has opened up in ways that I never thought I was closed in, but now it's like, wow, you know, the world is my oyster.
That's right, Jill.
You know, it's cool to think there's more than one path, more than one right path for me.
Yes. And you know, something I want to share just about Alli, because I was asking her, because Ed and I flew to Seattle to tell her that we were leaving the church. And I was asking her if she, you know, knowing that I was going to be coming here, I just wanted to kind of see what her thoughts and feelings were about that time. And she told me how it was an absolute shock to her. She said, I just thought, she goes, I'd wanted to get away from the church, but I just knew that was never going to happen for me. I was always going to be entangled in it because, you know, the people I love were going to be in it. And so she said that, you know, it was just huge. She goes, I didn't believe it for a minute because it happened so fast, you know. But she's like, it was just, for her, it was freeing, very freeing.
Marky's nodding.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've often thought, how can an LGBT person look at their believing Mormon family and feel complete love and acceptance, knowing that they're remaining in a church that, in effect, if not devalues them, demonizes them.
Yeah. And I think it's because the church that I believed in wasn't that way. You know, you go along your happy little life, and you know you don't think that way. And
it's the church in your head.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And you
versus
don't
the actual church, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that, you know, and we had just such a special experience when we told Ed's nephew. He's 45 years old now, and
he's gay.
And he's gay. And last summer, Ed and I flew out for Pride. I'd never been to Pride. That was such an amazing experience for me. I cried because, again, my heart was just so open. And we met with his nephew, and just to see the relief in him, because he always loved Ed and Ed always loved him, and we'd always accepted him and loved him, but still, even though that's how you feel, being in the church puts that barrier there, and that barrier's there, and it's always going to be there, and it doesn't break down. And when we told him, you know, just the relief and the tears and the disbelief in him that this is where we were at, and just the just happiness, and just to watch so many walls just crumble has been worth everything.
Yeah. I was thinking about, there's this difference. I'm not saying this is true for everyone within the church with regard to how they view, LGBTQIA human beings, but it's just the idea of acceptance is really, really different. Like, I'm thinking of you talking about pride. Uh-huh. To accept someone is really different than celebrating someone. Like, the difference of that, and when you go to pride, that's what you feel.
Yes.
Yes. That shift of like, wow, what a marvel.
Yeah.
To be celebrated.
Yes.
There's an acceptance piece, I feel, within Mormonism, where it's sort of like, it takes work. Yeah. You're like, it's hard.
But we're tolerating it.
Yeah, but we'll really work at it. We're not really sure where you're going to end up or how this is working out. But like,
maybe you'll get fixed in the
afterlife.
But the inference there is not like wholeness, celebration, and like, how lucky are we?
Exactly. And it was huge for me when I just realized I would never want Alli to change. Why would I want her to change? Never. And to see all these people being somewhere where they feel loved and accepted, and our son Tom, he was actually a really good a friend of his is a drag queen, and he was playing the guitar in this drag band, and they were on the center stage at Pride, and just to hear them, Tom was in the band, and we were just having so much fun because they were also just talented and up there and just having a good time, and then, they kind of closed out the show with just kind of really a heartfelt, it just, well, at least it hit me in the heart. Hearing them all up there singing "Don't Stop Believing." And that just really got to me.
Well, I knew when I met you guys that we had to do this interview, and it took a couple months. But I'm so grateful you guys stuck it out and made the trip here, because this is a profound interview and immediately one of my favorites.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
We knew we couldn't pass up the opportunity.
Oh, we're so grateful for the opportunity. So grateful.
This one's going to help a lot of people.
Yeah.
So thank you. And I just want to say there's a twinge of joy and sadness. Joy because this is like happily ever after. There's always going to be suffering in life and tragedy, but like this turned out like, it seems like almost like a fairy tale ending on every level. And what makes me a little bit sad is there's going to be families where things don't end this beautifully for. Right. But still, I want people to have hope. Even if they can have half of the positive outcomes you guys have, that's something good, right?
Absolutely. And I just think that no matter if you're deep into your faith or not, just love people. Just love people and accept them where they're at. And I just think that if you just do that it will be good. Because it's not going to be bad if you're doing that.
Yeah. I just keep thinking about, you said this to me earlier, but I mean, we used to have the Family Proclamation hanging in our home. But she has a new quote hanging in our home too. What is that?
Well, I have it. Do you mind if I share it?
Please, we'll end on this.
Okay, but I don't have my glasses, Jill. So
do you want me to read it?
You may need to read it. Yeah. So yes, this is what hangs in our home instead of the Family Proclamation, and it's "Hope" by F. Scott Fitzgerald.
Yeah, so it says, "Hope. For what it's worth, it's never too late. or in my case, too early to be whoever you want to be. There's no time limit. Start whenever you want. You can change or stay the same. There are no rules to this thing. We can make the best or the worst of it. I hope you see things that startle you. I hope you feel things you've never felt before. I hope you meet people who have a different point of view. I hope you live a life you're proud of. And if you're not, I hope you have the courage to start over again. I love that. Very grateful for everything that I've felt and experienced.
Yeah, me too. I'm grateful for my time in the church because it got me here somehow, you know. It made me who I am. So
We honor you both. Your hearts are just,
thank you.
Thank you.
we're so
Thank you
grateful.
so much.
Honestly.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Julie and Jill Durrant. Thank you to Ed. He's off screen, but thanks to Ed. Thanks to Alli and Jamie and Tom and Gabby and
Jake
and
Ariel.
Ariel and Christy. Like, thanks to everyone that helped make today possible.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. And thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
And Margie, it's so amazing to have you here. Thanks for joining us.
So glad I got to be here.
All right. Well, I hope you enjoy. I know you enjoyed today's episode. Thanks for joining us. Please share this episode with everyone that you can. If you want to support Mormon Stories, you can do so at mormonstories.org. But most importantly, just be good to each other, be kind to each other, love each other, and enjoy that life. Enjoy that life.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Thanks again, Julie and Jill Durrant.
Thank
You guys
you.
take care.
Thanks.
We'll see you all again soon on another episode of Mormon Stories Podcast. Take care, everybody.